Wow, wow, wow. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us right here today. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and tax gurus from every corner of the globe, welcome to the most anticipated event in the fiscal industry. It is the virtual Tax Inspire Conference 3.0. My name is Mercy Frank. I'm a storyteller, a journalist, and the anchor for today. And together, we are about to embark on a journey that transcends borders, transcends time zones, and most importantly, transcends the complexity of one of the most important talked subject matters, global taxation. Now, in a world where change is the only constant, our theme for this conference resonates louder than ever. The theme is presenting a united front through global tax reform. Now, today we are not just participants, we are architects of a future where fiscal policies converge, aligning our strengths to build a stronger, fairer global economy. Now, as we gather in this virtual space representing diverse industries, professions, and perspectives, we share a common purpose to navigate, I beg your pardon, the intricate web of tax regulations. How many of us find that very, very disturbing and sometimes misunderstood for those of us who are not very strong in the tax, in tax jargons, right? And we at this particular point in time will be able to decipher the complexities and most importantly, to forge a united front that propels us forward as a collective force. We know that the challenge that we face all over the world is unprecedented, but so are the opportunities. These decisions are made in the boardroom, in tax offices, in the legislative chambers, across the borders. But what happens? These decisions affect businesses, it affects individuals. I, in particular, have been affected at some point in time by the tax policies that have been put in my country. It's time for us to collectively redefine the narrative and shape policies that not only sustain economic growth, but also foster inclusivity. So, what's going to happen for the next few hours that we are here? We're going to be delving into thought provoking discussions. We're going to be gaining insights from trailblazers in the tax landscape. We are also going to be exploring innovative solutions that transcends geopolitical, geographical boundaries. The speakers that we're having here today, which includes moderators, panel of discussions, keynote speakers, and the likes, each of them are going to be bringing a unique perspective to the table. And you, our esteemed audience, are the heartbeat of this conference. You and I are the catalyst for change. So fasten the virtual seatbelts, sit properly, ensure that your seat is okay and you don't get any back pain after sitting for a few hours in this virtual conference. And then engage your inquisitive minds, drop your questions in the comment section, and I'll be going through the housekeeping in just a few seconds. So let's embark on this intellectual journey together. Now, this is not just an event. This virtual tax conference is not just an event. It is a movement. It is a call to action for a world where global tax reform isn't just a possibility, it is an imperative. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, once again, as we find a way to get these ideas running and present a future for a united front through global reforms. Now, just to let you know that this event is being organized by Tax Inspire, and Tax Inspire is a global tax initiative aimed at increasing tax consciousness, ensure continuous professional development through organizing conferences, webinars, and training. I want to say a very big thank you to our sponsors of this conference, Tax House, Rene Consulting Limited, and Addit, and our publicity partners are tax clubs in Nigeria. But just a little housekeeping before I get out of your way. You need to focus because you do not want to miss anything. You need to also share the word. Now, our representatives will be dropping the social media handles, the Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Thread, whichever one you may, or even TikTok, as it were, because it's one of the places to go to. We'll be dropping it on the comment section right now as I'm speaking, and do look at it and Share every word that you get that you think hits you so much. Don't shout. It's okay. Don't argue in your office or in your room, wherever it is you're at. Just go on social media and tweet it. Tag the person you're tweeting and let the whole world see it. And also ensure that you tag a tax house, especially the social media accounts that will be dropped in the comment section. Okay, go ahead and just share the word. You do not want others to also miss this good news, and try to keep yourself hydrated. We know that we are all in different places in different time zones. Just keep water or tea by your side. I got one here to keep myself busy. I don't want to be dehydrated, So let me get out of your way, because we have so much to unpack in this awesome 3 hours, and open the way for our convener to give his opening remarks. He is Olajide Omosebi. And if you go on his LinkedIn handle, you will only find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words, all about taxes and impact. Ladies and gentlemen, if you may, drop your favorite emoticon, your favorite meme, if you can, on that comment section right here, as we welcome the convener for his opening remarks. The mic is yours, Olajide.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you, Mercy, for the wonderful introduction, and thank you for being the anchor of this year's conference. I'm excited to be joining you all today from Boston, and can see many of our attendees from different parts of the globe. And I'm also excited to be the convener of this year's conference. This conference is so personal to me and special to me, with a theme presenting the United Front to global tax reform, which we believe suits the current state of things in the global tax space, and has now appeared to become, or can be said to be, a prophecy. I have struggled to pen anything I feel might be of interest to you all, but instead I will share stories from my diaries, and in the end you may agree with me, the tax diary, because life itself is all about tax, and tax is all about life. In the course of planning this conference, I met with a young man who happens to be the president of one of the tax clubs in Nigeria. I greeted him in Musa, and in excitement, he responded. He wanted to continue the conversation in Hausa, but I quickly interjected and said, "Nah, I'm not Hausa, but I had school there. I served there as a core member. But this experience has taught me something very special, that it is important to meet people where they are in life. Recognizing their culture, their orientation, or their biases to issues is a way to make them feel comfortable and to make them align with whatever it is we want to do. This is true for countries as well. And really, making rules for countries, I think we might want to bring all countries on board. Because really, a global tax reform that will affect all countries also deserves that we have all countries on the decision-making table. Because you cannot shave a man's head behind his back. If you expect countries to sign these rules, then of course you must put into consideration their take on some of these issues, on all of these issues. My friend had taken us to Cheesecake Factory recently before moving to Bermuda. Bermuda is a beautiful island and is also set to implement the global tax. My friend had taken us to this My friend had taken us to Cheesecake Factory before moving to Bermuda. Bermuda is a beautiful island and also looking to implement Pillar 2 minimum tax. A friend of ours, upon seeing the menu, said she would have preferred an African restaurant. Our host tried the salad, and upon its recommendation, I tried it. I enjoyed it. Our third friend still insisted she wanted a local meal, African meal. The truth is, countries will never kick against something they believe will be in their best interests. If she had seen an African dish on the menu, perhaps she would have opted for it, but instead, no. A consulting firm also, the third of my stories, a consulting firm also had conducted research some years back and discovered that every Friday the purchase of beer and baby food were at par. It was discovered that fathers who came to grab beer usually get calls from their partners to also get baby food from the store. Based on this information, the store rearranged their products and placed them side by side. They made millions in sale. This again shows the importance of research and development and data analytics. If we must transform our tax systems in Africa, developing economies, I believe that we must invest heavily in research and development. Every tax authority, revenue authority, must have a research and development department where we are able to understand the why. Why are taxpayers not disposed to paying taxes? Why the poor compliance culture? What can we do to enhance this? How can we ensure tax transparency in tax payments? These and very much more, are things that research can reveal to us. Never forget, an efficient tax administration or tax office or revenue authority is instrumental in transforming a developing economy to a developed economy. Some of the questions that have been over about the mind of many of the policymakers, taxpayers, is with the recent move by the UN, will it affect the achievements that have been made at the OECD level, or will it take us back? Well, this conference is set to answer these and many other questions. We're lucky again this year, and I will even say blessed, to interview one of the most influential women in the world of tax, Grace Perez Navarro, and she was interviewed by Kelly Phillips. And we delved into her life, a journey to the top, and how she became the most influential woman in the world of tax. She had mentioned how Jeffrey Owens was pivotal in Target becoming number one woman in tax. This experience or this conversation has made me realize the importance of people that pass the baton to us, the importance of people and mentors who are helping us or have been willing or have given us opportunities to thrive, to showcase our talents. And for this, I'm immensely grateful for the likes of Professor M.T. Abdulrazaq SAN, the likes of Mr. Olufemi Olarinde, who have been very supportive of this conference since inception to date. Also, Emeritus Professor Judith Friedman also. In the end, I want to just say thank you to everyone. And I'm also excited to announce again that our keynote speaker, Professor Rita de la Feria, the best of the best, a Portuguese and a special person in the world of tax, also very influential, an excellent scholar of national repute, will be delivering a keynote address briefly after these opening remarks. I want to thank her. I want to thank all the planning committee members, all our partner firms, partner publicity firms. I want to thank everyone, and thank you so much. And I declare this conference open. Thank you.
I beg your pardon. I guess what happens to you when you are having a virtual event happened to me. I did not unmute my device, and so you were singing me speak, and nothing was coming out. Right. Thank you so much, Olajide, for that beautiful opening remark. And one thing I took away was the issue of research, which really is the big problem we find in most industries, and then investment in research, which makes research possible, and the likes. Thank you so much for that. So quickly, since we do not have much time to do so many talking, I'll be introducing the keynote speaker, or introducing the woman that will be giving us her keynote address, no other person than Professor Rita de la Feria. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our favorite emoticons right there on the comment section as I quickly read her profiles so that you can get to have a little understanding of who she is about and set your heart expectantly at what you'd hear her say. She is a professor of tax law at the University of Leeds and an international research fellow at the Oxford University Centre for Business Taxation. She's also a member of the advisory panel of the UK's Office for Budget Responsibility, that is OBR. I mean, who else would you want to hear about about the issue of taxation from than such a person? She received a law degree from the University of Lisbon and has other amazing backgrounds that she has been through to get to where she is today. Her research focused primarily on tax law and policy, and she has published widely in that area, including 5 books and over 60 journal articles and book chapters. She is actively engaged in global tax policy discussions and has provided tax policy and legal drafting advice to several governments worldwide and has testified before 5 elected parliaments. Now, she has written opinion op-eds, just go ahead, for The Guardian, The Conversation, and has worked with BBC Panorama and The Guardian. She's also an expert on the Paradise Papers leaks of 2017. You can go online and check that out. She was listed 2 years running, that's 2015-2016, in the Global Tax 50 as one of the most influential tax people in the world, and was co-recipient of the 2016 Outstanding Women in Tax Award. Really, if I keep reading her profile, I probably would, in fact, get dehydrated right now, because this is somebody who is rich in anything global taxation. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, as I usually say, drop your favorite emoticon, a round of applause over and again, a 100%. Well, sometimes you can drop your heart emoticon for Professor Rita de la Vera for her keynote address. The mic is yours, Professor.
Well, thank you so much, Mercy, for the warm welcome, and thank you to Olajide for his invitation to be here today. He gave me a very broad topic of tax reforms and putting a united front. And from that topic, I thought I would give some indicators of the importance, I guess, of tax reform. So I'll start presenting a few slides, if that's okay. Yes, okay. Can you see it? Hopefully, yes. Okay. I can't seem to move my slides, but I guess these things happen when you. Okay, so somebody's moving them for me. So I guess these things happen when you're doing a live keynote address. So, as the name indicates, I'm going to talk about a little bit about tax reforms and the tax fallacies that I think are somewhat an impediment to some of the tax reforms. I'll discuss why we need tax reforms, why they are hard, and why we have, in the context of those hard reforms, have started to look at tax administration as a cop-out in a way to avoid the pitfalls of the tax reforms. And I'll conclude my keynote by trying to convince you that the only way forward really is through a symbiotic approach to tax policy and tax administration. So that tax policy and tax administration cannot live without each other. You cannot have a good tax policy without having tax administration properly resourced and properly sourced, but at the same time, tax administration on its own cannot solve some of the issues that you see in tax laws. So next slide, please. Okay, so where do the need for reform comes from? In essence, our traditional tax systems are no longer fit for a globalized and digitalized economy. So in the traditional tax system, we had a physical and territorial approach to taxation. So we knew where things were and we knew across what borders they were. In the globalized, digitalized economy, that is no longer the case. We are no longer so sure who is entitled to tax what and who is in a position to enforce the tax. Next slide, please. So we have started basically trying to reform our tax systems to bring them in line with this globalized, digitalized economy. And we have put a lot of resources. And I think the panels today are focusing a lot on this issue of corporate income tax. So we have received a lot of attention, a lot of resources. In my view, there has been advances, but the success hasn't been as big as the amount of resources indicate. On the other hand, with a lot less attention and a lot less resources, we have had also extensive reforms of the VAT system at global level, led by the OECD, at European level, led by the European Commission, and these have had high levels of success. So what we have now is broadly a very good picture of how VAT can be charged in an effective manner in a global and digital economy. We haven't started at all looking at personal income taxes, which are, in my opinion, is the elephant in the room. But I think that this is going to be the next frontier in terms of labor mobility. So, looking at this kind of these high success, low success pattern, so what do we see in terms of why tax reforms are so hard? There are two kind of big reasons, or reasons can be divided into two big types. First, there is the domestic side, and then there is the international side. At domestic side, you have technical obstacles to reform, but you also have political obstacles to reform. And in terms of technical obstacles, you have often this kind of balancing act that you have to have between efficiency and equity. So the most efficient system at all will be inequitable, unfair, but at the same time, absolute fairness will lead to a very inefficient tax system. And you always have to balance the two. You have to balance the tax system with other objectives in the system. So equity and efficiency, which are like kind of key are principles of tax systems, have to be balanced off with other objectives, like, for example, environmental goals, sustainable growth, etc. And you also have often this kind of confusion between whether the tax policy is the best way to address a specific tax goal, so a specific policy goal. So is protecting, for example, the poorest or protecting the environment the best a meritorious policy aim? Is it the best way to have a tax tool to address those aims? But often we talked about these issues. We talk a lot less about the political economy obstacles to tax reforms, and these are quite significant. So first of all, there is often the kind of path dependency problem. So we have tax systems that have lasted for a long, long time. And so we, in essence, need a lot of political capital to overcome the legal procedures and the legal entrenchment that is inherent to our tax system. So you need a lot of momentum to overcome and to pass the legal procedures necessary for tax reforms. You also have the tax reforms, for good and for bad, have often a high political salience, so meaning that people know about them. If you change one single iota of the personal income tax system, people will talk about it, will discuss it, will be high on the minds of voters. We have had recent case in Colombia when there was an attempt at change the consumption tax system, and there was literally uproar and massive protests on the streets until the government had to drop the tax reform. And you often have this role of the lobby groups on these tax reform discussions. So what you see is, in essence, that when you have a tax reform, there is always losers and there is always winners, and the losers tend to be very, very vocal, and often the winners are all of us. So in a good tax reform, hopefully it's better for the whole population, but the losses are often concentrated on those that will lose specific benefits, so they are much more vocal. So if you put all of these things together at domestic level, it's often very difficult to pass tax reforms. At an international level complicates this, because at international level, what you have is also these technical obstacles, but you have also political obstacles. And in terms of technical obstacles, you start with the issue of the mobility of factors of production. So capital is very mobile in a global digitalized economy. Labor is starting to be very mobile. How do you achieve a fair taxation, efficient taxation in a system whereby people can move and capital can move very freely? And there is also a kind of scraping for resources, as in a foreign direct investment. Everyone wants a little bit, but it's finite. So we end up in this kind of massive global competition for foreign direct investment. And in order to get it, we often use tax incentives, corporate tax incentives usually, but increasingly also personal tax incentives. So you have all these kind of technical obstacles at international level, and then it adds to that the geopolitical dimension, which is something that I know that some of the panelists are going to talk about today. But in essence, you have this discussion constantly between whether we should have a competition or we should have cooperation. And when you have cooperation, geopolitical dynamics in an unequal world often means that tax cooperation will be ensued into to the benefit of those that are the richest and that are more powerful countries in the world. So you often have this paradox from an international perspective with tax reforms, which is nothing will happen unless rich countries are on board, but rich countries will only be on board if and when the reform benefits them. So tax reform, for all these reasons, for domestic and international reasons, tax reforms are very hard. Next slide, please. So often policymakers start thinking, oh, this is just so hard. So do we really need it? And this idea has started to develop, particularly in the context of what has been happening in terms of developments on the digital economy and developments in AI. Tax administration has had a massive surge in terms of developments and the use of technologies to enhance compliance. So this looks really tempting. So you often see what in behavioral science you call motivated reasoning, which is policymakers look at tax reform, they see it as being so hard, and they look at these new promising tools for tax administration, and they start thinking, oh, maybe we don't need tax reform. Maybe if we have a very new, brand new technology and new tax administration AI system, that will do the job. Next slide. Thank you. So, and the truth is that AI is indeed, and new technologies in general and tax administration are indeed very, very promising. First of all, they have low political salience, meaning, voters don't really care that much about tax administration. So you're not going to lose, from a political economy perspective, you're not going to lose votes with that. They function really well in countries with low capacity, which is a big issue in a lot of countries around the world. So they need less human resources. They are highly effective. So we know that these compliance technologies are very good at not only combating fraud and negligence, but also at removing compliance frictions. They make it easier for individuals and taxpayers in general to comply. They also have other kind of spillovers. They are very good on decreasing corruption. They mean less administrative discretion, which it also impacts positively on abolishing behavioral biases. So we know, for example, that people are harsher on their decisions, and this includes probably tax auditors if their football team lost the night before, or if they are hungry and they haven't had their lunch yet, or if they slept badly. This is normal human behavior. It's known in behavioral science as noise. And we know that AI doesn't feel these things. They don't have a football team. They don't feel hungry. They haven't slept badly. So for all those reasons, AI presents itself as a highly effective and a rational way to overcome many of the tax administration shortcomings. Next slide, please. The problem is that AI also carries risks. Now, we know there are general risks with using AI. There is more and more literature. Olajide was just talking about the research. There is a lot of research in this area on the uses of AI, on the risks of using AI. They carry the risks of discrimination and inequality. They create very serious concerns as regards privacy and data management, not only how the government is going to use that data, but the risks of cyber attack by criminal organized groups. And it also creates this, what is known as the digital divide. So the vulnerable, those that are elderly, those that are digitally less attuned with the development, so that are not as digitally educated as the newer generation, for whatever reason, because of age, because of disabilities, etc., or because of language. For example, minorities in this case can find difficult to deal with AI. So the advantage of the AI of not feeling hunger has also the disadvantage of, in essence, it doesn't feel empathy either. So if your situation is difficult, the AI won't feel empathy for you. And there is also, alongside all these risks that have been identified in the technology and the AI literature, there is always specific tax risks. And on this regard, I would say the biggest risk of all is the risk of unconstrained success. The idea that you no longer need the tax reform so long as you have a very good AI system to back you up. Next slide, please. And the truth is that the tax system is dependent fundamentally on two things. It's dependent on tax design, and it's dependent on the increased compliance and revenues. And both these issues are not just dependent on tax administration, they are dependent on tax policy. So starting from a tax design perspective, only policy can adequately fulfill your goals. So if your goal is beyond tax administration and maximizing revenue, if you have other objectives of the tax system, you can only design the tax, and you can only fulfill those aims if you design the tax policy and the tax law adequately in order to fulfill those aims. So you can't eliminate all the problems on the system, or you can't create incentives within the system for policies that you want, for example, for environmental goals or for job creation, for example, unless you actually tamper with design of the tax. Second, even from a compliance perspective, you would think, considering the advantages of the AI that I just mentioned, that so maybe we can't achieve other objectives by introducing a new AI system, and we need tax reform, but compliance will definitely improve, and revenue mobilization will happen if we do the AI. We don't maybe need tax reform for that. The truth is that we know that there is a very significant link between design and compliance. So if you give people opportunity to commit tax crimes, or to by basically committing fraud, or opportunities for planning and avoidance, people will take advantage of that opportunity. So think about yourselves. Think about how you left the house today and go to work. You probably locked the door in your house and then left the windows closed. Why did you do that? Because you want to minimize the opportunity for being robbed. But you know that criminals that are really focused-minded will probably be able to break into your lock and your door, and they will probably be able to break the window, and still you close the door. Why? Because you're trying to minimize the opportunity for the criminal to happen. So you have to have a very motivated criminal in order to break the lock and break the window, etc. The risk of being caught is much bigger, etc. So you minimize the opportunities for the crime to happen by basically locking the door and closing the windows. Similarly, here in the UK, a lot of parks close at night, because we know that parks at night are a source of criminal activity, drug trafficking, antisocial behavior, sexual crime, robberies. So we could have potentially 50 police on the streets in every park to ensure that criminal activity doesn't happen, but that's not very effective. So In many UK cities, the parks just close once it gets nighttime. So why? To minimize the opportunity for criminal activity to happen. This is known in criminology as situational crime prevention. And what I'm suggesting here is, in essence, to minimize tax avoidance and to minimize tax fraud, to enhance tax compliance. This is precisely what you need to do. You need to design your tax system in a way that minimizes the opportunity for tax avoidance and for tax fraud. You close up the opportunity. Tax AI is the new anti-avoidance measures. So we think that anti-avoidance measures can solve all your problems. The truth is, unless you deal with the causes of the avoidance, and unless you deal with the causes of the fraud, you can't effectively deal with the problem itself, of the non-compliance itself. So to sum up, the two are symbiotic. You can have a fantastic tax administration. Last slide, please. You can have a fantastic tax administration and not be able to solve all your problems if you don't have a proper tax design. And similarly, you may devise a fantastic tax policy. If you don't have a tax administration in place to implement it, then that tax policy is likely to fail. So the two are symbiotic. For a long time, we used to pay only attention to tax policy, and we forgot tax administration had such implications. I think we are in risks of doing the opposite now, because tax reform is so hard. The risk is that we are paying too much attention to new technologies in tax administration. As important as they are, we cannot forget the implications of tax design and tax policy for the good functioning of our tax systems. And this is all I wanted to say. There is a couple of references on the next slide on which this keynote was based. I would be very happy to talk to any of you about the issues that I just covered. Thank you very much for your attention.
Fantastic, fantastic, Prof. Thank you so much for this amazing keynote address. The first thing I'm going to say, as a storyteller that I am, one thing that I would never forget is that, you talked about the tax auditors being human as well. And so I penned it down. I told myself, whenever I have anything to do with the tax auditor, I'm going to first sit the person down and ask the person, how are you? How was your day yesterday? Did your team win or lose? Did you have anything you're not supposed to have? What about the hours before? Because they are humans. And thank you as well for also bringing that nexus, or that point where tax issues and technology converges. We know different industries have been battling with the issue of AI. I mean, little did I know that at some point, even people in the tax industry, people who I do not even understand, as somebody who really don't have love for figures except there's a currency behind it, I have to also deal with the issue of technology. But thank you so much for delivering this fantastic keynote address. It was a good one. Thank you so much, Professor. And yes, as we let Professor not go out of the conference, she's still with us, much with us. Drop your questions, drop whatever lessons that you have learned. I'm watching right now, I'm watching everything that's going on, all the conversations that are going on right now on YouTube, the comment section. Thank you so much for all those who have actually dropped one or two comments. But just to do just a bit of a recap from what I personally have learned from what a professor did mentioned earlier on. The keynote practically touched on tax reforms versus tax fallacies, like we saw on her PowerPoint. And the basic thing is about tax reforms. Why do we really need this thing? And why sometimes are they so difficult? And of course, you talked about the issue of the AI fallacies of unconstrained success and the link between design and compliance, which is very important. With all the reforms that you are making, how does it ensure that people do not get to run away from tax compliance and commit tax frauds? We have lots of people from all over the world who are very, very guilty of this. I just hope we have nobody here who's guilty of that. If you are, I think you've been caught red-handed. Thank you over and over again for this beautiful one. So please, let's go right now. I'm watching everything that we're doing on what's it called, on YouTube. Let's drop our comments right there. What have you learned so far from the keynote session? Quickly, I want to see your comments so far, and I'll try as much as possible to get some of them out here. Kingdom Purpose, you're saying hello. Frank Elliott, you're saying hello, but where are you helloing from? We don't know where you're helloing from. Drop your location so we can get to know where you are reaching us from. Taiwo Marvelous is saying very impactful. Thank you so much. For Taiken saying hello, everyone. And Taiwo Marvelous is saying he's watching from Uni Abuja in Nigeria. So yes, we have a representative from Nigeria's capital, Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Lado Morris Emmanuel is watching live from Juba, South Sudan. Woo! I need a bell. I need something to ring. Hello. Thank you for joining us all the way from South Sudan. He said he is attentive and he do appreciate. Akinoluwa Akinride dropped his, hands up emoji. So to go ahead, I want to see your comments pouring in. I'm trying to take a look at it. Bola Ahmed says, good day, everyone. Frank Elliott said, how do I get my questions to the panelists? Okay, just drop your questions right here. You can drop your questions here. Then if there are other modes of sending your questions, definitely you're going to get it right here on the comment section. But I think this is the best place to get to drop your questions. Go ahead and drop them right here on the comment sections. And then whoever it is that you're addressing the questions to will get to answer. Okay, go ahead. All right. Clement Ikoche, do you think that tax... Okay, he has asked a question, and he's asking the question from Asaba, Nigeria. We're going to get your questions. Our professionals at the back end are noting your questions, and they're going to collate them. And at some point, we're going to answer the questions. So you don't need to go anywhere right now. Frankie Elliott is joining us from Ghana. Akwaba. Akwaba all the way from Ghana, the motherland. Okay, Ibrahim Uluokun is joining us from Ikeja, Lagos, Nigeria, and he's looking forward to being impacted. I believe that you've had enough right now. Just yet. Clement is reaching us all the way from Nigeria. Where specifically from Nigeria are you reaching us from? We would like to know. Okay. With that said and done, while we are waiting for the rest of you to go ahead and drop your comments and everything that you need to drop, don't forget that you can drop your whatever it is that you've learned from social media. Okay, you can drop them on social media and ensure that you tag everybody that you should tag. The comment section will be loaded right now with the social media accounts. Right now, I don't think I can see it. So please, I want our social media executives to please drop it right now on the comment section so that people can get to see it and tag with appropriate hashtag as well, please. All right, so we will be going straight into the next item on the agenda, and it is a powerful one, and it will be a bit of an extensive touch to what a professor did touch on earlier on, because she just did more like a summary of it, like a bite of it. And for the first panel we're having today, the focus is going to be reforming tax administration in developing economies. It's very important that we take a look at, the developing economies in the light of the subject matter that we are talking about today. And the person that will be doing justice to this, the professional that will be doing justice to this particular topic of reforming tax administration in developing economies is no other person than Obare Princess Musa. Okay, she's a legal practitioner, a chartered tax practitioner, an arbitrator, and over a decade of expertise in the international tax landscape. Now, as the tax team lead and head of corporate compliance at Goldstone Attorneys, she authored a groundbreaking SOP on tax compliance for civil society organizations in Nigeria, now impacting over 250 CSOs across 10 states through training sessions conducted under the British Council EU ACT program. Now, her versatility extends beyond the legal practice. Now, she adeptly compares corporate events. Well, speaking about someone who has multiple hats on and is killing it with it, and has also facilitated high-level roundtable for CSO accountability and transparency initiative at the second national conference for CSO operational environment. Okay, her commitment to professional development is reflected in her role as a fellow of the Nigerian School of Internet Governance and membership in the prestigious organization such as the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, the Nigerian Institute of Chartered Arbitrators, and so many others who, if I begin to pronounce, I may get to bite my tongue. She comes loaded, absolutely loaded. Now, her moderation style is characterized by precision. She effortlessly adheres to timelines while enjoying the full realization of the session's objective. Engaging, knowledgeable, and globally connected, Obare Princess Musa stands as a distinguished moderator poised to elevate the discourse at this particular conference we are at. So we're going to see her bring all this absolutely great, difficult to pronounce terms on her CV to bear as she hits the hammer on the head of the nail and helps us understand better and have a better conversation as regards reforming tax administration in developing economies. Ladies and gentlemen, as I'm looking right now at the YouTube comment section, drop your favorite emoji, a round of applause, 100%, whatever it is, for Obare Princess as she takes us through this particular session, and she'll be introducing the panelists. The mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Mercy. Like when you were reading that, Sylvia, I had to start looking left and right. Like, who's the person? Who's the person they're talking about now? So thank you very much. Thank you to the conveners of this very, very distinguished conference for having me here today. And Mercy, you've done a fantastic job so far, I must say. I was actually admiring what you were doing. So quickly, I'm not going to take much time. And I also want to thank the keynote speaker. I'm not going to take much time then. I'll quickly want to invite the chair of this session because the time is fast spent. And so diving right into it, I'm just going to be reading his profile. Yes. So Mr. Olarinde Michael Olufemi is a tax policy expert and a multidisciplinary professional. He holds a bachelor's degree in banking and finance and a master's degree in financial management. He is the assistant director in the Federal Inland Revenue Service and presently the technical assistant on my mic is muted. He's an assistant director in the Federal Inland Revenue Service and presently the technical assistant on tax policy to the executive chairman of the FRS. He specializes in tax policy, legislation, and research. With over 16 years of experience in tax policy, accounting, and administration, he is the Nigerian country correspondent to the Commonwealth Association of Tax Administrators. He's also a member of the United Nations Subcommittee on Health Taxes and also a member of the African Tax Administration Forum. He stands so tall in the tax segment. He's a taxman. I call him an erudite taxman that is also a tax encyclopedia. So, ladies and gentlemen, join me with a virtual round of applause to make welcome the tax chair for his opening remarks. Mr. Olufemi, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Princess, for those kind words of yours. Well, like you said, I only call myself the taxman. Of course, in taxation, like we said, there's no gender, though we are now fighting for gender equality, even and equity in taxation. However, what I'm saying today, thank you for Olajide and all the organizers for having me on this session. And it's been, I think, 3 years now that this conference has commenced. And I know many people have learned so much with this conference, and I'm happy to be part of it. Today is also another day which we brought knowledge to people. We have brought this discussion, of course, to ensure so that everyone could contribute their bits. I want you to know that it is not just a jamboree, it is not just a place of discussion, just where we talk. The right authorities, the right people who need to get information from this source are getting it. Is it government? Is it the tax authority? Is it even the tax practitioners? I'm sure everyone is taking something away, even from this conference, and it is not, what we are doing here is not in vain. And so I want that to be as a word of encouragement to the organizers and to everyone who is partaking. I just also want you to get some knowledge out of this conference today. And I will not take any time but to stop here and leave the floor to Princess to introduce other panel members so that we can get the ball rolling. Thank you very much, and I welcome you all to this panel session. Thank you. Hello, Princess, I'm back.
Thank you, Mr. Femi, for that very short but enthralling, welcoming remark for this session. Can I confirm also that we have on this panel right now Miss Patricia Jackson? Okay. Welcome on board, ma'am. So quickly, I'm going to read your profile, Miss Patricia Jackson, and thereafter we'll dive right into it with the questions that we need to talk about for this session. So Miss Patricia is an experienced tax counsel with proficiency in providing tax policy advice and legislative drafting. She is also a former prosecutor with a specialty in tax fraud and corruption matters. She holds a Bachelor of Laws and a Master of Business Administration from the University of the West Indies and a certificate in legal education from the Norman Manley Law School. Ladies and gentlemen, please give Miss Patricia Jackson a very thunderous virtual round of applause. You can do that with the relevant emoticons. Thank you so much for joining us. On this panel, we'll be talking about reforming tax administration in developing economies. And Mr. Olufemi Olarinde has already set the tone for this discourse. So quickly, let me start with the lady in the panel, Ms. Patricia Jackson. What are the key components of successful communication strategies to educate the public about tax policies and also promote voluntary compliance? Because we know when we say tax is not something everyone really wants to comply with, especially when you are in a developing nation where you don't see what the tax income is being used for. So getting people to comply is actually a challenge. So what do you think the successful communication strategies to enhance voluntary compliance and to enhance good tax policies, what do you think these strategies would be to educate the public? Please let us know.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm happy, firstly, for I answer. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And it's a very interesting time in the tax world. And but to just get directly to the question that you have posed there. So communication strategies, of course, there are so many options. They're diverse and they vary from country to country, depending on where the country may be in their tax administration development and the knowledge base, and also the type of economy and the type of taxpayers and taxes that exist. Some jurisdictions are relatively new in terms of administering tax, and others are more developed and have a more robust system, and so the strategies will differ, will be different. A key thing to note, I would say, is that communication strategies to enhance compliance have to be focused on the long term, right? Changing behavior, changing culture over a period of time, developing understanding and awareness so that taxpayers are able to understand the system. You raised, Princess, the point about taxpayers feeling this level of unawareness or wondering what is my tax dollar being used to do. And so how our communication strategies need to be targeted. They need to focus on getting the taxpayer to understand that tax revenues are really a significant source of revenue for the government, to build social programs and financing healthcare and education and paying tax officials and paying civil servants generally. And there are all the programs that the government has to finance. It's useful building roads, fixing roads, building infrastructure, and so I think targeted programs that highlight how tax revenues are being used have to be a critical emphasis in building a culture of tax compliance, of voluntary compliance. Another significant thing is that, of course, there has to be a dedicated communications team. So that has to be a part of the strategy, that a team that is aware, that understands the system and know the type of strategies and the focus points for each target group. Some other things, so the type of group, so if it's the more sophisticated taxpayers, the businesses, the corporate players and the larger taxpayers, the strategies have to involve providing guidance, policy, practice notes, providing information, and building like email mailing lists to ensure that, and publishing things on the website, mailing lists to provide like regulations, new amendments to legislation, policy directives, and just guidance notes and practice notes to assist with greater compliance. And for smaller taxpayers who it's providing like assistance, so short videos to show persons how to register, how to file their returns. So there are many types of strategies that are critical, and they have to be targeted based on the different taxpayer groups and the different needs of a particular jurisdiction. And so those are some of the things that I think are critical. So taxpayers need to know that, and of course these things need to publish on various media. So short videos on YouTube or on the website, for Facebook, different media, things which are published to the print media as well as to on radio and press conferences, and so, but there are a myriad of issues, a myriad of methods which I think are critical depending on the type of taxpayer and the needs of a particular jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jackson. You from everything you've said, this actually speaks mainly to the tax administration workforce, because in putting out communication to communicate with the taxpayers, this will come from the end of the tax administration workforce. That takes us to our next question. And this question will be directed at the taxman, Mr. Olufemi Olarinde. So please, can you tell us in what ways can developing economies tailor capacity building programs to address the specific skills gaps within their tax administration workforce? Because if taxpayers are to get information are to be educated about tax policies, issuance of guidance notes, and all of this so that they can comply voluntarily. You will agree with me that the tax administration workforce has a lot to do. They have a role to play. And to play this role, they will need good skills. They will need the relevant skills to play this role. So, what ways can developing economies tailor capacity building programs to address the specific skills gaps within their tax administration workforce?
Okay, thank you very much, Princess. That you from the questions, the way you framed your question before, I believe you've already answered some of them. When you say tailor, it simply means it should be fit for purpose. It should be fit for purpose. Of course, we know that most things we do these days, many times we often try to go borrow ideas from the Western world, from the Western economies, not really, and we call them best practice. Because we go borrow them, we call them best practice. However, it's like a bridge. You get to a particular point before you cross over to that place you call the best practice. You don't leap from point A and go to point Z immediately. So you, when talking about tailor simply means you appraise your environment, appraise your system before you now start developing your capacity building. Number one, what are the capacity you have presently? You need to start from there. What is your capacity presently? So I would like to share some things, some examples from the Nigerian Federal Inland Revenue Service. Sometime when FRS started the reform in tax administration, we needed to move from the manual processes to digitization. And what did we talk about? What is digitization? Number one is that we want to move from manual processes to electronic, which means we are moving things from manual to computer-based. So how many people, how many civil servants at that time even know how to use a computer? So that is where we are supposed to start from. You first have to empower those people, not buy computer. And many people got it wrong by buying computer first. Yes, you have to buy computer, but even before buying computer, your plan will be together. First, train them how to use computer. So we commenced a project then in FRS. The then executive chairman started a project, I think they call Project FACT or something, which was to first train every staff how to use basic use of a computer. Then we started deploying computer. Then before you now start going to ensure to let them start using computer to do their daily transaction. And that is moving from the manual process to even so now that the capacity building program or the capability building at that time was to build a capacity that the staff understands how to use the computer. Now going to the general way. Now, how do you do this? You have to study your staff. What is the capacity at that moment, and what capacity do you want to acquire? And you start training them based on the need assessment. You would have done a need assessment. You know the kind of training they need. Then you start deploying that. So we start from point A, point B. We continue to review we know we want them to start deploying AI in tax administration. But how many of the staff can actually, do you have those who will write the codes? Do you have those who will? So we know the best way, all of us want it easy, as good as possible, to use AI to collect. Now we have gotten to, in FRS in Nigeria, I've gotten to a place where creativity and innovation is what they are letting staff to do, to bring on board now. So staff who have creative minds and those who are innovative can start bringing or can develop applications. So what I'm saying is that when you're looking at building staff capacity, you first have to review what you have on ground, and also do it with the need, your needs. So you don't prepare. We have what we call tax administration 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. Now you're at 1.0 and you want to train staff on 4.0. That is not what you need. So you move, if you're at 1.0, you want to move to 2.0. You train your staff, you develop capacity based on 2.0. So the long and short of all I'm saying is that before you start deploying capacity building and trainings for staff, evaluate where you are, do a need assessment, and deploy capacity based on present need, based on your need assessment. And also so that the capacity you deploy today will not be useless. And so with these little examples, I'm sure it will go a long way. Princess, if you want a rider, me to put more to this answer, I am available. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. What you said was so talking about appraisal, because before you get to start tailoring solutions, you need to appraise where you are at first, and then you can start it off from there. So thank you very much. We'll definitely have a rider today, but we'll proceed to the other questions. But quickly, I need to apologize for the absence of Miss Layla. She's airborne. And we're also expected to see Mr. Karim. He's unavoidably absent as well. He sent his regrets earlier today. And so we'll make do with these erudite panelists that we have today. They're already doing justice to the topic. To all those participating, you can attest to the fact that they're already doing justice to the topic. So now I will come to Miss Jackson. I'll come to Miss Jackson on this next question. Ms. Jackson, yes, you spoke about engaging relevant strategies for communicating with the public to enhance voluntary tax compliance. Yeah. Now, in talking about tax awareness, right? What do you think is the role of education? What do you think is the role of education in voluntary tax compliance? When we talk about awareness, what role can education and awareness programs play in promoting voluntary tax compliance among businesses and individuals in developing economies? This is a rider to the question you answered earlier.
So, I mean, I think simply put, it plays a very significant role. You know, for persons to, the essence is that we want taxpayers to understand why are we being taxed, what's being used for. And I think particularly for younger tax jurisdictions, they, I mean, as you pointed out, nobody is there waiting in line thinking, I really want to give my money to the government, right? And so it's very critical that persons understand where their tax revenues are being used, how they're being used, and also how to comply. What are the requirements of the law? So it's I would say it's extremely significant because it helps to build a culture of compliance. It helps to build a culture of awareness and understanding. What I found in my own experience, I'm in the Bahamas with the tax department there, is that and we're a relatively new tax jurisdiction. So one of the things which I found is that they certainly when we're implementing value-added tax about 8 years ago, a critical focus point had to be awareness and developing understanding, because this is new, and so there was a lot of emphasis that was placed on training and getting the taxpayer to understand, getting the businesses to understand how to register, how to, when you're required to file returns, what transactions are taxable, and so it's very critical from the standpoint of creating a culture of awareness. So why is it that we're being taxed, how it's being used? I had mentioned before the fact that tax revenues are used to, it's a significant source of revenue for the government, perhaps a main source of revenue, and it's used to fund social programs and to finance healthcare and education and so many other things that the government cannot charge for, or operate as a business. So I'd say it's extremely significant, and also one of the things which I have discovered as well is that at one of the, I mean, of course, you have some persons who will not comply and will always come up with strategies not to comply. But I think most taxpayers were provided with the tools to comply, will comply. And so if they're being made aware of the provisions of the law and some basic things, just so some taxpayers don't know when to file, don't know when to register, and just understanding what is taxable, how to, and also from the standpoint of engaging persons even before changes are made in the legislation, so stakeholder involvement and getting input so that there is greater buy-in, and also to ensure that we understand the industry as well, and that we are covering the correct basis, and that the tax policies are being applied in the best possible way, based on the needs of the jurisdiction and based on best practices. So those are my comments on that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jackson. Our accurate tech people are just told me that we have just 3 minutes left, and we have a lot of questions from the audience already. So I'm not certain if we're supposed to take the questions now. Are we supposed to take the questions now, Ms. Mercy? Ms. Mercy, are you there? Okay, she said yes, please. We have more than 5 questions from the audience. Okay, so quickly, for the first question, this is from Clement Ikwache from Asaba. He says, do you think that tax evasion in multinational company is a problem? Do you think that tax evasion in multinational company is a problem? And okay, so this question, I'll direct this question to Mr. Olarinde, and I'll just go ahead to read all the questions so you answer them at once, because we're pressed for time already. And then from Frank Elliott from Ghana, he says, in Ghana, the Revenue Authority's motto is fairness and integrity, but as a tax consultant, it doesn't see this core value in their operations. And how can we achieve voluntary compliance with this? And then the final question we will take is from Clement also. He said, how do you marry government sincerity, inclusive development in spending taxpayer money, and taxpayer compliance? Okay, so these are the questions that have been shot out to the panelists. So, Mr. Femi, please take it away and answer the questions you want to answer from these questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I am sure this question, even the people that answered the question, I'm sure he has the answer. He just wants tax evasion is a problem anytime, whether it's from multinationals or MSMEs. So, as in Nigeria, I would say our national constitution, since Section 24, say it's duty of every citizen to declare his income truthfully and remit his tax to the relevant government. So what it simply means is a mandatory provision for everyone. And I'm sure it applies in every other country. when you earn income, you are expected to pay taxes. And so when you don't pay taxes, of course, still do not expect government to have the required resources to take care of their own needs. Like I used to say, government are just our errand boys. We have sent them to do some things for us. When you send them on that errand, you need to also equip them with the resources to carry out such errands. So if you don't do such, if you don't equip, of course, they can't do so much. And let me speak to Ghana. I'm also very close to Ghana, so I can speak. They say the Ghana's motto is fairness and integrity. It is not just Ghana's motto. The financial profession, our motto naturally are always issues of integrity. And one of the principle of taxation is fairness and the canons of taxation. And to that extent, every tax system is expected to be fair. And for you to say they are not fair, I'm sure it will require more of a proof. Or you would have stated clearly some instance so that we can see if you could put some reason to it. However, I believe that no one likes to pay tax. No one, even in the Bible or in the book of faith, you know how a taxman is addressed. But we believe that every country should be responsible enough to administer the taxes collected appropriately. Thank you. I believe I've been able to speak to those questions.
Yes, you have. Thank you very much. Do you want to say anything, Miss Patricia?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I certainly I agree with you in terms of the fact that so I won't comment on the issue as to whether that core value actually exists. But what I will say is that that fairness and integrity certainly is a very important part of enhancing voluntary compliance, because and sometimes the perspective that there isn't fairness or integrity is really a communication issue. And so I think it's very important for the communication strategy to communicate, to indicate, so for example, to publish rulings, publish decisions, to show taxpayers the consistency in the application of legislation across various taxpayers. And so I think that kind of approach enhances that understanding of the fact that how the tax laws are being applied across taxpayer groups, and because persons, and also sometimes the tax authority would need to be made aware of instances. So of course we always encourage persons to, if you're aware of on lack of compliance, to inform, so that the laws can be applied across taxpayer groups and not only to specific persons. So, and of course, integrity is very critical, because of course, if we communicate that tax revenues will be used towards a particular thing, then taxpayers would want to see that that's how the money is being used, that there is no corruption in
Okay.
the system, and so. All right, so
Okay.
so I said those are critical components of tax administration and enhancing voluntary compliance.
Thank you so much, Miss Jackson. Thank you so much, Miss Daff Olufemi Olarinde, for the great job you've done. We've been told that we've got to go. So thank you also, participants, for participating and for the questions you answered. It was a pleasure moderating this session. Thank you all for joining us. Miss Mercy, please, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Princess, for doing a fantastic job. And thank you to that future tax auditor, or that future official that will be talking too much about taxation. I mean, all through the conference, he was just letting us know how he feels about the situation in the tax industry. Princess, please say hi to Bibi and tell him or her that we love. We so much do love for him or her. Thank you as well to the panelists to that said everything that he did say, especially with the issue of capacity development. That was such a stunner. Taking baby steps are very important because sometimes we as taxpayers, we see some of the things that these officials do and we're like, who trained? Didn't you get a training in the first place? And sometimes it breaks into some verbal, brouhaha here and there, but it's a good thing that we're having such a conversation. And we just do hope it does foster some progress, especially when it comes with internalizing best practices, for taxpayers in the developing economies. Thank you so much for that. Well, our constituents on YouTube it's been very busy right here on YouTube. So if you're not on YouTube, I think you're missing a whole lot. Thank you so much for everybody who has been posting their chats, their comments, and their questions. Clement, I'm seeing you. Frank Elliott, I'm seeing you. Sono Felix is giving us a handshake. Thank you so much for that. And Frank is saying one of the profound panacea for voluntary compliance is that taxpayers want to see the taxes spent on things that improve their living standards. That's what he's saying right here on YouTube. Like roads in good shape, health facilities functioning, and the rest of them. Osatu Emmanuel is thanking the panelists for doing such a great job for the first session. Abidemi Akinpelu, thank you so much for that wonderful wave. Keep your comments and your questions coming up. S1, I can see your hand wave. Debanji Jayola, I can see your applause. Clement Ikoche, of course, I can see you. You're pretty busy. I mean, maybe we should even give a gift to the person who has the most comments or the most reactions on YouTube. Who knows? Who just knows who's going to win that? But thank you so much for that. Go ahead and share everything you're learning so much, including the questions, the concerns that you're having so far on social media. Tax House is very easy to find all over the internet. So you can just Google Tax House, or you go to Instagram, go to LinkedIn, go to Twitter, then just search for Tax House. I'm sure you're going to get their handle and ensure that you use the hashtag. Let me quickly get that out so we are all on the same page. Hashtag Tax Inspire Conference 3. Okay, Tax Inspire Conference 3. If you can hear me, please put it on the comment section right now, on the chat box. Put hashtag Tax Inspire Conference 3. Just go ahead and put it so that other people can benefit from it and use it as well, so that all our postings, can be seen by anybody who puts that particular hashtag on whatever social media platform that a person is speaking from. Don't forget, it is at Tax House on all social media handles. Thank you so much. So we are not done yet. We're going to be giving you back-to-back content right here at this particular conference. We do not want to forget to say a very big thank you to, our sponsors for this particular conference: Tax House, Reni Consulting Limited and Addit, and of course the publicity partners, Tax Club, all the tax clubs in Nigeria. Thank you so much. Well, just to let you know and remind you that this event is being powered by Tax Inspire. It's an initiative that is aimed at increasing tax consciousness and ensuring continuous professional development through organizing conferences, webinars, trainings. We are in one of them. Without further ado, let's go again into the next panel session this time around. They're telling us that we'll have to strengthen our palate for a 2-course meal. I'm sure you'll be wondering, what is this 2-course meal all about? Well, there'll be somebody who will be doing justice to that himself alongside other people. He's no other person than Todd Buell. He is the moderator for this particular panel. Who is he? He's an editor at large at Law 360 in Brussels. His specialty is tax policy with a particular focus on the European Union. Previously, he covered the European Central Bank for Dow Jones, Newswires, Wall Street Journal, and Market News International in Frankfurt. His undergraduate degree is from, this name, you correct me whenever you come up. Baudouin, that sounds French. Baudouin, I don't know. Baudouin College in Maine, okay, no? And he has an MA from the University of North Carolina's Transatlantic Masters Program. Ladies and gentlemen, as is our usual practice, you have to encourage and make welcome no other person who will be helping us understand what this two-course meal is all about and why we should strengthen our palate for it. Ladies and gentlemen, Todd Buell, who is going to also introduce the panelists and do a fantastic job for the next 40 minutes. Todd?
Thank you so much, Mercy. And it's a pleasure to be here live from Brussels, Belgium, to take part in this great Tax Inspire event. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's my pleasure to lead this event, or lead this part of this event, excuse me, part of this panel. And as before we just get started, I'd like to introduce a couple of the participants here. We have Olatunji Abdulrazaq. He's the founder of Tax Mobile Online, managing partner and CEO of AOA Professional Services. And before that, he worked as a director of tax and regulatory services at Nolan's Nigeria Professional Services, and was a senior manager for tax, regulatory, and advisory services at Saffron Professional Services, tax and financial reporting accountant of Schulberger Nigeria Limited, and as an audit trainee at Ernst & Young. And we also have Suranjali Tandon. He's an associate professor at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy in New Delhi in India. I also have someone here called Shadrach Saddih. Unfortunately, I don't have his bio in front of me, so he may have to introduce himself. And then we have another panelist who unfortunately is not able to join us here. Her name is Natalia Quinones. And I think as a courtesy to her, she sent me a statement, and I'm going to read that, and then I would invite the panel to just jump in and discuss that, if I may. So this comes from Natalia Quinones, and she is an advisor to the Colombian Minister of Finance and the international tax partner with Quinones Cruz in Bogota, Colombia. So she says, as the tax rules that govern cross-border transactions are becoming increasingly obsolete in the face of mobility and new technologies, the pressure for finding an adequate forum to rethink, decolonize, and renovate the rules is higher than ever before. The OECD provided the inclusive framework as a potential solution with unprecedented technical capacities, but failed to secure universal participation, equality in the agenda-setting process, and transparency in the determination of consensus. Fortunately, the African continent, through the potent collaboration between the Africa Union, ATAF, and civil society, has given us new hope for a space that can remedy the process failures and pave the way for a truly collaborative solution that acknowledges the limitations of national borders in a globalized economy. Colombia has been a fervent supporter of the African initiative, and I personally believe that we have before us an opportunity to design a new type of international organization with universal participation, with no prerequisites, equal access to agenda setting, transparent voting procedures, and the best technical support. Our idea going forward is that we will merge the best of both worlds from the OECD and the UN, bringing the superior technical capacities to work for cooperating countries in a solid decision-making process. So I'll start. That was a comment sent to me from Natalia Quinones. So why don't I invite the panel to just comment here? I mean, just give any reaction that you'd like to what Natalia was saying here. But she also talks about merging the best of both worlds from the OECD and the UN. What would be the best of both worlds from those two? Who would like to jump in first?
Todd, if I may.
Suranjali, go ahead. Yes.
I think, Todd, what we've seen from the experience of the OECD is that there is a massive buildup of capacity within the OECD to draft reports, which are extremely laborious, full of detail. And I think that's one thing that's kept the UN away from setting the agenda. And I think if we were to combine that with the level of inclusivity as we desire, where developing countries are able to set the agenda, I think that would be an ideal combination for international tax reform, I suppose.
Okay. Shadrach, would you like to say anything on that?
Thank you very much. I to a large extent, I think she has spoken my mind. This is one of those questions where the response is almost already in the question itself, because it's almost literally the best of both worlds. If you can just take the best of what you have. I mean, you can't take any one of the two plans and say this is entirely fine or this is entirely bad. So if you could take the parts that are good about the UN plan and take on what has been done by the OECD and merge them, you could look at the failings on this side and then merge them. So almost quite literally, you could say that you want to take, the best of what you have on both sides.
Okay. And Olatunji, do you have something to add to that?
Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, from my own perspective, I think it's a two-way thing. One, we're looking at it from the taxpayer side, and I'm also looking at it from, the tax authorities, for example. And, the tax authorities from their own end are trying to protect their tax base. And, the taxpayers are also trying to ensure that they pay efficient taxes. So definitely, it still boils down to interest. When you look at the OECD guidelines, you also look at the United Nations. Well, it's going to be an interesting time ahead. So I think we should just wait and see what happens in future. Thank you.
Yes, that's very good. Very good and helpful comments there. Thought we'd get into some of the questions that we'd prepared ahead of time here. Shadrach, why don't I ask you? I mean, how would you describe right now just the state of collaboration between the OECD and the UN in shaping, international tax policies? I mean, we had the major vote at the UN a couple of weeks ago in which, led by African countries, but also a lot of resistance from Western or sort of the countries in the global North. So, I mean, can you talk a little bit about, as you see it, how is the collaboration going between the OECD and the UN? We seem to have lost him. Shadrach. Okay. Well, that's unfortunate because just as I was about to ask this question, his screen has gone. Okay, the technical folks are saying he'll be right back. So I don't know if shall we hold on or shall I just move on with another question maybe and we can come back to that. Yeah. Shadrach is back. Okay, Shadrach, did you hear my question?
Yes, I think I got the thrust of it.
Okay.
I think I got the thrust of it.
Okay, the floor is yours then.
So okay, thank you very much. I'll just say that first of all, it is easy to look at this thing from the point of conflict or the obvious tension or friction that is going on. On one hand, you have the OECD perhaps feeling a little hard done by. They've done all this work over all these years, and then all of a sudden it looks like they're the bad guy, And then you have the UN feeling perhaps that, well, you guys had your chance, you haven't made the most of it, and we have no option but to step in and correct it. So it's easy to have that sort of friction or tension going on. But I think if we're going to be fair to both sides, what would be better would be to look at it from the perspective of collaboration, which I think is part of the point of this meeting in the first place, to see what can be done moving forward. I don't think a them versus us or either or kind of perspective is going to be beneficial for the global tax audience, so to speak. But what would help each and everyone, as Olatunji said, whether you're talking about the taxpayer or the tax authorities or just interested stakeholders and so on, what would be beneficial for everyone is to look at the areas of strength and say we're at a bit of a crossroads here, where one organization seems to be going in one direction and the other seems to be going in the other. But at the end of the day, I don't think a dual international tax system, if you like, will benefit anyone, and we're better off going this thing together. So my view would be to say that we should look at past collaborations and see what has been done together before. You have the platform for collaboration on tax. You have the tax inspectors without borders and so on. These are collaborations that have gone on between the OECD and the UN in the past, even if not exclusively. Perhaps other bodies are also involved, the World Bank and so on. But the point is that you have collaborated in the past. There's nothing that stops you from collaborating again on this. And for what it's worth, my advice in this regard would be that if we all focus on the important things, if we're really looking for the same sort of outcomes to make the system easier, to ensure that people are not unduly bogged down with compliance and so on and all of that, then I think we will achieve at a common end. So if you speak of the state of the collaboration, I would say perhaps it's not at its best state, but that is not to say that there's nothing to build on or there's nothing to look up to. I do believe that there's a lot that can be built on based on what has been done previously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I appreciate the more kind of upbeat tone there, looking at the collaboration, looking at the commonalities. I mean, and I wonder, what in the future? Maybe a little hard to envision now, but I wonder in the future, would we be talking about, I don't know, one body that would be setting the standards of tax? That would be, I don't know, would it be the UN? Would it be maybe a broad, an even bigger table under the OECD? Would it be a completely different organization that may be a bit far-fetched? I don't know, but it just seems like, yeah, you're setting sort of a path toward collaboration and working together. Suranjali or Olatunji, would either of you like to jump in here with some thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Todd. Like I said, we have interesting times ahead, and this is for me. I think it is, is a very simple thing. Some people are talking about fairness, equity. You should pay taxes where it is due, and things should be looked at from international perspective. Now we have about 1.5 billion people who would be affected, with whatever decision that is taken, that is taken in international cooperation. So we need to look at, we need to be selfless. We need to try as much as possible not to be self-centered. We should look at all, interests and ensure that we all move forward. Now, what I'm thinking to do in terms of collaboration is to say, okay, let's look at the argument of United Nations and also look at the argument of OECD. And then, you look at the difference and see how you can align, with those differences. I'm sure there are areas where they both agreed, so that is not an issue. So they should look at those areas of differences and try to reach a compromise in order to move forward. Because about over 1.5 billion people will be affected here. And that is what is most important. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. And finding this compromise that you're talking about, do you have any? What would that look like? Do you have an idea of what that would look like, Olatunji?
Well, for me, we have there are two sides to this. Now, for the United Nations, if you look at the vote, it favors the developing nations, right? While on the other side, the OECD is with the developed countries. So what I'm saying, in essence, is to look at areas where both the developing nations disagree with the developed economies and try to, reach a mutual understanding on how to, proceed forward. That's what I'm saying. And I think it would be better to, to address it that way.
Okay. And Suranjali, if I may, I mean, in your view, and following up on what Olatunji was saying there, I mean, what can be done to make the tax system, more inclusive, so that the voices of more countries can be heard? And just before you answer that, the organizers have asked me to tell the audience to put their questions. If you have questions for the panelists, put that in the chat box. So please do that. Sorry, Suranjali, I give the floor back to you.
Thanks, Todd. I just want to step back a little bit and think about what we're discussing at the moment. In my view, we've always had a dual international tax system in terms of conventions, right? So we've had the UN convention, which is the UN model, which is used by certain countries while negotiating treaties. And then you had the OECD model. Now, what has really changed, at least in the last 4 to 5 years, is that there has been too fast a development on a specific aspect, which is digitalization. UN's own proposal of 12B was left behind. And what you've seen is that negotiations have been, in a sense, very exclusive. The conversations are not up for people's review. So I think in the future, you will still have these tensions. There will still be different ways of looking at international tax. I think what would be useful is to be able to invert that conversation and see if there is ability to push a certain model amongst developing countries. If there is ability to create capacity to say that a particular format or a model works well, I think what is also necessary to hold together a new organization or a new forum is a common purpose. A lot of comparisons have been drawn with the climate negotiations, for example, where the UN really has a monopoly. But why does it have so? It's because there's a convention which may be vaguely defined but has a common purpose, and there is we keep hoping for consensus, but I would caution that consensus is hard to find there as well, despite there being common purpose. So we'll have to learn to live with these difficulties, which is systemic, but at the same time, if we can just invert the order of things, it just gives you an opportunity to ask questions on what's the dominant practice or model.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the climate conference or the climate body, because I mean, or the UN in that way, because I mean, as we know that I mean, the climate conference can be very chaotic, or can be very and it can be very difficult to reach consensus, or the consensus that's found can be very weak and sort of lowest common denominator, but it's still a forum, and it's a very inclusive forum. So in that sense, it sounds like that's more in the direction that that you're trying to go in. Olatunji or Shadrach, would either of you like to jump in here on this?
Just a quick word. Something Suranjali said, struck me. Consensus really is a bit more complicated to reach. I mean, we can all speak of consensus, everyone just meet halfway and all of that. But in practice, it may not be as smooth sailing as we would like. Thinking of your one big united body, I don't know, you may need to hold on for that. I'm not sure if we're going to get to that point. I mean, Todd, you were saying something about you wonder if in the future we're going to have one big body that's in charge of everything. I don't know about that. Chances are what you're going to find will be what she has described, that we're going to learn to agree to disagree, more or less. Also coming back to something Olatunji said earlier, you know, when you speak of meeting each other halfway, I think what will be helpful is if we can first of all agree on the things that are not controvertible. You know, I'm a lawyer and, well, I haven't practiced in a while, but then I know that one of the things you do is when you get to court, you have the facts that are not in dispute. So when we agree on the facts that are not in dispute, we can keep them aside and say, okay, no need going over these. We know these are what they are. And then we can focus on the areas where we do not agree. One benefit of that is in this conversation now, perhaps if we look at the areas of agreement, they may suggest to us that there's more together than apart, you know. So I'm saying that going forward, if we're going to try and reach some sort of consensus, even if it's not perfect, we could start from saying, okay, what has been done, which is good? Is this acceptable to this side? Yes, it is. And this side, yes. So we're good. This is fine. Keep that aside. Then move to the next thing. Is this a problem? No, it's not. Then move on. So if you're able to sort out the things you agree on and keep them aside, it will give you a proper or easier, better focus on the things that are the actual points of divergence. And then you can focus on those with the confidence of knowing that you do have some things in common after all. And perhaps that would help you move forward together.
Okay, then perhaps then and I'll just ask this to any of the panelists who want to jump in your own based on your own experience or your own knowledge. I mean, what are the areas that are in agreement, that are beyond dispute, as Shadrach was saying, whether it's, I don't know, between the OECD and the UN, or between the richer countries and the developing countries. I mean, it's very, I'm speaking, I guess, in very broad terms, but in this area of topic of things that are agreed on, you know, where do we see those, and how can those be expanded? So anyone who wants to jump in on that? Or was that too broad a question?
Todd, if I may take the opportunity to jump in.
Yes, Suranjali, go ahead. Yes.
So I think there is agreement on what are the problems in some cases, and there's also an agreement on solutions, but there are many where there is no agreement on the solution. Problems are broadly defined. I think where I think the UN could make an impact first is to hit the iron when it's hot, which is to talk about digitalization. There's been enough conversation. There's a proposal there as well. And I think it stacks up quite well against the 250 pages to have a neatly defined Article 12b. The other is to talk about illicit financial flows, because I think there's been enough focus on adding transparency to the system, which I think has been done through the exchange of information. But I think that needs to be taken the next step by saying, how do we ensure that illicit financial flows are stemmed? So I think that's another place where there's an easy way to collaborate, because I don't think there will be countries that are going to object to setting standards on stemming such flows.
Okay. And you mentioned digitalization. I wonder if because the OECD Pillar 1, right? You know, the redistribution of taxing rights that was supposed to remove the need for digital taxes. It at least based on everyone that I talked to, this seems unlikely to succeed, if only because it will not be ratified in the United States. If Pillar 1 fails or just is put on ice for a long time, does that open the door for the UN to take a bigger role in how digital companies are taxed? Anyone want to address that?
Okay, with respect to digital economy, is also an interesting part. Why I said this is that tax is local, and I think everybody is going to structure their own tax law to suit them. Whatever United Nations or OECD is putting forward is just a guideline. Let me give you an example. when you talk about Pillar One, or when you talk about the digital economy, for example, let me use Nigeria as an example now. The Finance Act, the Finance Act 2019, we talk about significant economic presence. Of course, from that definition, Nigeria has put a particular law forward saying that, okay, if you operate like this, or if you derive any income from Nigeria, you should pay this subject to certain conditions. So even if those guidelines are put forward, each country will still find a way to, to put it in such a way that is going to favor their own economy. So basically, one of the things I also want to add is that the current international collaboration, whichever way, it turns out to be in future, whether OECD, whether you're going with OECD or you're going with United Nations, each country will still put the local law to suit them. Now, it not depends on what you are actually after. Whether you are, encouraging investment is one thing, or you're trying to increase your tax base. So either way, everybody still have to do things that are going to suit them, because OECD guidelines or United Nations tax convention are merely, guidelines or principles, but the law of any jurisdiction remains final. So that is my own point.
So
Yes.
countries will do what serves them. I mean that I at the risk of embarrassing myself, I think our keynote speaker Rita has talked about the tax policy inspired by an American comedian called Larry David, where it's called the me first philosophy, that whatever starts me first is what countries do. If that is the case, then let me put the question back to the other panelists then. If that's the reality, what are we doing here? What's the point of having the OECD, the UN, whatever, if countries are just kind of going to do what serves them? I mean, what's the point of having these international bodies?
Well, the truth about it is that, a lot of, like I said, these guidelines or tax convention are just to guide each jurisdiction, to treat their law. It's like it's like having some principles. Let me give you an example. You're talking about digital economy. You're talking about BEPS, for example. Where people move things from probably higher tax jurisdiction to the lower tax jurisdiction. Of course, this is understandable, but then, like I said from the beginning, it's all about interest. Looking at it from the taxpayer, trying to structure, their taxes in an efficient manner, and then looking at the tax authority, trying to expand their tax base. So you can see that, everybody has an interest. So basically, each country is going to do whatever suits them best, but then they will tailor it to these international, guidelines, so as to, probably attract investors in one way or the other, and at the same time collect what is due to them.
Okay. Just want to take another chance to invite members of the audience to ask questions in the chat. I think we're having a really interesting discussion here. A lot of thoughts, ideas coming up. So if you're listening, I'm can imagine you'd have questions, thoughts. Please do not hesitate to put them in the chat, and I'll pass them on to the to our wonderful panelists here. So don't hesitate to put things in the chat. Let's see. I mean, I think I can say, broadly speaking, that the vote at the UN in November happened because, developing countries, which I know is a very broad term, but some developing countries felt that their voice isn't being heard, thoroughly at the OECD. I mean, what can be done, whether we're talking about the OECD or, or the UN, what can be done to sort of ensure that the perspectives and interests of developing countries is heard in a better way? I mean, how can that be done? And I see we've lost somebody again. Is Shadrach. Oh, no, he's back. Okay. I mean, what can be done to just make sure that developing countries have a stronger voice?
Todd, if I may jump in at this point and make a quick
Yes, go ahead.
comment
Yeah.
about your question.
Yeah.
So I think what can be done, I think what's additive to what exists today in the international tax system is the transparency. So we still don't know which countries vote for which particular decision, what their preferences are. I think the last that we saw the preferences on international tax being explicitly expressed was the MLI. And I think through a voting process, perhaps, through minutes of meetings, which also happens sometimes in climate negotiations, sometimes, and to some extent, I think that might be a useful addition to this. And of course, laying out all the options on the table. So it shouldn't be that, one particular preference is being worked on iteratively. I think the first action point, the action point 1 report in 2018 was more, in a sense, broad. It covered a lot of options. Of course, it didn't endorse any, but I think a menu of options is a better way for the new organization or a revamped organization to think about inclusivity.
Okay. And I've been told by the organizer now that there's only 5 minutes left here. It's amazing how fast this goes. So maybe just to wrap up, I'm going to ask each of you to give make a 1 minute closing remark. The theme of this, the 2-course meal. The OECD and the UN. How can they, best work together? So how about let's go Olatunji, Shadrach, and then Suranjali to finish. So Olatunji, just a 1 minute closing remark. I think you're muted.
Okay, thank you very much, Todd. Yes, it's been an interesting discussion. I think the way forward, in summary, is continuous engagement. Continuous engagement with members, both developing nations and developed economies. There needs to be a continuous, engagement, to fine-tune whatever disagreement that is there. And I think with this continuous, engagement, things would be resolved, amicably. And with that, the international community can move forward and then have a common front, with respect to taxation. Thank you.
All right, continuous engagement. I like that. That sounds good. Shadrach, your 1 minute closing statement, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try and make this as quick as possible. My closing statement would be that I think both parties, so to speak, in this discussion, that's speaking of the UN and the OECD, should reflect on the fact that the UN resolution has the word inclusive in it. And then when you speak of the OECD, you speak of the inclusive framework. Inclusivity is really, really critical. It's key. You can't speak of a global platform if some parts of the globe, so to speak, feel left out of the conversation. So the conversation should focus on ways in which we can have practical representation. It's not enough to say there are 27 African countries represented in OECD. What sort of voice do they have? What sort of contribution can they make to the decision-making process? I think part of the reason we have this sort of double approach is that the developing countries do not feel that they have a voice or that they're at the table. Really, they're more of observers of the process than part of the process. So I think anything that can be done in practical terms, whether it is to improve on the technical assistance already being provided, or improve data analysis and such, whatever can be done for the developing parties to see that they are in fact part of the decision making, I think that would go a long way to advance the discussions. That I think would be the most important thing at the top of my mind. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Shadrach. And to conclude, Suranjali, your final thoughts.
Thanks, Todd. I think there's a great deal to learn from the last decade, whether we look at the MLI and the minimum standards there, the harmful tax practices, and the shutting down of these, as well as on the exchange of information. And I think Pillar 2, in some ways, has set a new norm for international tax. So it seems like a new customary international law. And what that really means is that, one, there are places where countries agree. But I think the way to get agreement is to have options. So you should have opt-ins and opt-outs. And most programs for the OECD which have been successful have been those where there are options. So for example, even for dispute resolution, the ability to say no to arbitration brought a lot of countries on board. So I think whatever the new organization is to find a least common denominator, but with a menu of options. Thank you.
Okay. Great. All right. Suranjali, Olatunji, and Shadrach, thank you so much. Mercy, I guess it's, I pass the floor back to you.
Oh, that was a fantastic one. Thank you so much. And kudos to you, Todd. The way you pronounce Olatunji's name, I mean, you almost sounded like a Yoruba man. And Suranji, thank you so much for, joining us on this conversation. Thank you as well, Shadrach. I mean, Shadrach looks like the person who immediately the bell rings, he's out of the class. But he did a fantastic job. Thank you for joining us, even when it wasn't totally 100% convenient for you. You did a great job helping us really understand what is two-course meal. And the question I asked myself, which is one question that people are asking, even with this, with the recently held climate change conference, about the coexistence without friction. Well, I just told myself there's no option, because it's the way forward that everybody has to look at. Okay, so I really do wish that Todd and Suranjali had stayed, but we wanted to give them some African names, for those because I have people from all over the world, and well, I'm the host and I'm actually from Lagos, Nigeria, so I think I have the power to give them the name that is very, very conversant with people around me. So wanted to give him a Yoruba name or an Igbo name or an Hausa name, whatever it is. So guys, go to the comment section if you're an African. I want you to give Todd and Suranjali, give them an African name. Give them an African name. If you're from Ghana, there's somebody from Ghana, somebody from South Sudan. We have Nigerians here as well. Just go ahead, just give them the name that occurs most, wins the vote. We just package it and send it over to them so they can add it to their names whenever they are speaking to an African audience or even speaking globally. Thank you so much for that wonderful one. And the comments are pouring in. The comments are actually pouring in left, right, and center. Thank you so much. You're keeping the chat box pretty busy. Yes, I can see that you understood what the hashtag is. Tax Inspire Conference 3.0, Tax Inspire Conference 3. Fantastic. So I think we should just put 3.0. I mean, it's a stunner. It sounds nice that way. Thank you so much, Kwam. I can see your applause. Esther and Kemjika, I can see your applause. Or Satuyi, I can see your applause. Esther, I'm going to come back to your question, and your question is going to lead us to the next panel of discussion. Frank, you've been really busy here. Thank you so much. AY, you're watching from the city of Ado-Ekiti. Ado-Ekiti is a southwestern state in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us. And he's asking a question. That question is going to be for the for I guess Olajide is really going to answer this question. I'm sure somewhere when you were registering, they would have let you know if that's going to be given or not, but that will be responded to. Okay, so let me head to Esther Nkemjika, who asked the question, and she said, how do I begin my tax career and get adequate training? And speaking of adequate training and capacity building programs, earlier on, one of our panelists, the taxman, did say baby steps should be taken to ensure that the people who are within the tax administration, ecosystem gets adequate training, appraise your environment, ensure that it's evaluated, and you can give adequate training. Now it's going to lead us to the next item on the agenda, which is very important, and which is what one of the reasons why tax house exists, why tax house actually exists. I remember when I gave people give us a bit of an idea what tax inspire is all about. It's just, aside increasing tax consciousness, is to ensure continuous professional development through organizing conferences like this, webinars and trainings. And so people who want to train further would need to, further their education, as it were, both home and abroad. Well, the next item on the agenda is more like putting an icing on the cake, and it's helping us understand how we can get a tax scholarship across the borders. If you are interested in this, you're here, you're a tax student, you're here, you're a tax professional, you're growing, and you want to really, really understand how you can get tax scholarships across border. I want you to go to the comment section now. I want you to raise your hands or give an applause, or let me just hear you or see you type me. Let me see you now. I'm waiting. Let me know that you are really interested in this thing. Just type me. I'm waiting to see your comments so that I can get to introduce the next panel session, which is very important. As we can see, they're pretty young people right here with us. So let me see you type me on the chat box. I can see that the me's are coming in. I'm waiting for the me's coming. Great. I've seen another one. AY, thank you. Kwam, thank you. I've seen your me's. Let them keep coming in. Let's know that you are there. Let's know that you really need this. So as the me's are coming in, who is handling this? Who is going to help us champion this particular conversation? Dr. Okanga is a tax lawyer in the Toronto office of Osler, Hosking and Harcourt LLP. His practice comprises tax controversy and litigation and domestic and cross-border tax advisory. I think he's the perfect person to talk about this issue, right? Prior to joining Osler, Okanga practiced law in Nigeria and Canada, specializing in both this dispute resolution and business law consulting. He holds LLM and PhD degrees from Dalhousie University, researching mainly international tax and international trade law, and has regularly authored law papers, taught international tax at the Dalhousie University, and consulted on international tax policy with the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is the perfect person to take on this conversation right here on tax scholarship across border. Let's drop our emoticons, applause emoticons. Let's drop our thumbs up emoticons as Dr. Okanga takes us through this panel session for the next 40 minutes. Dr. Okanga?
Well, thank you so much, Mercy. It's good to be with you. And to some degree, it feels like being back home in Nigeria as well. On that note, I'd like to also welcome distinguished panelists, and I hope they're here, and viewers to the third panel session of the Tax Inspire Conference 2023. The theme of discussion for this panel is tax scholarship across borders. I believe Mercy already indicated that. And of course, the scope of discussion is international tax, cross-border tax, if you prefer. We have a number of sub-themes just to get us going. The first one is advancements in international tax research. The second one is shaping tax law through academic discourse. And the third one is bridging the gap between academia and industry. We're aiming for a number of outcomes in this conversation, three in particular. And first, we'd like to discuss the role of the academia in shaping tax policy. That's something that I have been keen on since I commenced my journey into tax scholarship and practice as well. Second one is to explore recent research in international taxation. So we'll be hitting on a number of issues to the extent that time allows us to do so. And third, we hope to foster collaboration between scholars and industry experts, makers and givers and takers of tax policy, whether from the academia or from institutions, tax administration, and so on. In these circumstances, I think it is fitting that we have a panel, a fantastic panel of 4 who will be speaking to us from different parts of the world. I'll just like to take a moment to confirm that our panelists are on board. Okay, great. Just in time. Thank you. So, first on the list is for Abimbola Abdur-Rahman Lekki, who is currently the head of station Lagos State Internal Revenue Service, LIRS, from Lagos, Nigeria. Dr. Lekki is a lawyer, teacher, mentor who currently serves as a public sector specialist with Nigeria's foremost subnational tax authority, the LIRS. It might interest you to know that Lagos has, I think, the top 5 is among the top 5 GDPs in Africa. So that's for someone who administers tax in a place like that, that's quite significant. She has undertaken tax consultation, representation, and mentorship roles with several local and international institutions, including the International Center for Tax and Development, ICTD, UK DFID, Global Entrepreneurship Research and Innovation Center at the University of Malaysia, OECD Women Leaders Exchange of Information and Tax Transparency Program, the AIG Public Leaders Program, and of course the African Tax Administration Forum, which has been a powerful voice in representing the perspectives of African countries on the global stage. Her doctoral thesis, entitled Improving Voluntary Tax Compliance in Nigeria with emphasis on taxpayers' rights, Lessons from Australia and South Africa, is a masterpiece on tax administration and tax compliance. And importantly, it comes with comparative tax scholarship, which is something that I particularly enjoy. Dr. Lekki, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Okay. And I believe our audience
can. Thank you, Mr. Okanga. Fantastic to be here.
Great. Next on the list is Dr. Leopoldo Parada. He is what's the word? He's a professor in tax law and co-director, Center for Business Law and Practice, University of Leeds in Leeds, United Kingdom. Leopoldo is a man who has traveled the world. He's previously held academic positions in Italy, the Netherlands, and Germany. He also previously practiced full-time as an attorney at law and tax advisor in Chile, Brazil, and the United States. Leopoldo's research focuses primarily on the international implications of base erosion and profit shifting, BEPS. Now, that's a word that everyone is sort of familiar with in our times. The application of double tax conventions and the tax implications of digitalization of the economy. That's another, hugely topical matter. He is the author of several books and academic articles published in recognized international tax law journals. Now, there's just so much to say about Leopoldo, but I'm going to pause here for want of time and move on to the other panelists. We have also Dr. Jeroen Lammers, who is an assistant professor in international tax law at Copenhagen Business School in Copenhagen, Denmark. He's a partner at Publion, a firm specializing in guiding organizations through changes in public policies related to taxation and sustainability. Now, this is a profile that I like very much because he's someone who has done it to the highest level in the academia, but also has extensive practical experience. So he's not an armchair critic by any standard. He's someone who knows the ins and outs of taxation and how it works. Not just for government, from the government side, but also from for businesses especially. His research explores the intersection of international and EU tax law with disciplines such as economics, political science, and legal philosophy. Again, this is extremely important for our team on interdisciplinary study, because tax itself is inherently interdisciplinary. So we really appreciate having you here, Dr. Lammers.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And fourth, or as we like to say, last but certainly not the least, I have Dr. Johann Muller, who is a transfer pricing and international corporate tax specialist at Better Tax APS, also in Copenhagen, Denmark. I'm envious. We have two people from Copenhagen. What a beautiful city. Johann brings 25 plus years. I have to stress that, of experience in international tax and transfer pricing, from working in Amsterdam, London, New York, and Copenhagen, working for large law firms, accounting firms, the Danish government, and various MNEs, multinational enterprises. He has published books and numerous articles on taxation, and is currently the editor of PE Plus, an international database on the taxation of permanent establishments. He also frequently undertakes interim assignments in tax departments of MNEs, focusing on transfer pricing and international taxes. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, I am really excited because of the attributes of this panel. These are people that I would love to learn from. These are people who just make us smarter. But I'm just going to jump in, and just to set the ball rolling, I would like to get you to sort of tell us a bit about your career, how you got into tax, right? And I picked this up because of I think that was the last question that Mercy Frank, our host, was trying to respond to. Lots of people in the audience were curious about pursuing tax scholarship as a career. So I'd like to throw it open. If any one of you is willing to take on, just tell us a bit about your journey into tax and say what lessons you have for those who might wish to get into this now or in the future.
Can I kick it off?
Yes, absolutely.
Because I'm actually, one of the things that we haven't talked about is I do a lot of online teaching. And that is for the Chartered Institute of Taxation in the UK, who has a diploma called Advanced Diploma in International Tax. Now, I'm not here to push their product. There's the IBFD that does something similar. There's a lot of other organizations. But I think, it's just going to university is not a possibility for everyone anymore, or not necessarily the cheapest possibility. And if you really want to learn, there are so many online opportunities nowadays to learn and to get diplomas. I would say look at those and try to follow those. And when you are in tax, I mean, you see it with the stream of legislation from BEPS and everything else. Accept a career of continuous learning. You will never stop to learn. So unless you are very curious and always want to know what's going on, take something else.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to take a bite at that as well?
Okay, I'd like to jump in also.
Yes.
I think that when I started my career, the environment has definitely evolved. So we started out dealing with domestic legislation and a lot of things that were really peculiar to Nigeria and Lagos State as a whole. Now we're going global, international tax, transfer pricing, thinking about the BEPS, cross-border taxation and all that. So I think my advice for anybody considering a career in taxation is pretty simple. You have to dig in deep. There's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of things that it's like reading a paragraph 10 times you really want to get into the meat of it. What is this really telling me? Also, I know that a lot of people that I've spoken to equate tax with calculations. I'm definitely not going there in tax calculator. Everything has been so simplified now. The calculators are online. It's basically simple. So I like to tell people that dig in deep. There's so many opportunities, so many avenues to a career in tax. It can be rewarding, fulfilling, and tedious. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think we're going to leave that one there, and but thank you. That's really important as well, because I get lots of questions from people who say, "Oh, I can't do tax because there's so much math in it," and I always say, look, when it comes to math, I'm a bit of a blockhead, so there's no way I could have survived, tax if tax was all about mathematics, right? So it's just reassuring to appreciate that even for those who are not math smart, there's a role for you in tax, and there are things to consider. So
If you know that 5 is less than 35, you will do well in tax. Trust me. It's not about the numbers.
well, I don't know that, but in any case, so I want to take us a bit historical here. If you look at the history of tax scholarship and how tax scholars of the past have influenced tax policy, you look at people like T.S. Adams. I think I have a list here. You look at the 1923 League of Nations report, which is sort of, to a large extent, the founding document of our modern international tax system. And you look at people like Carl S. Shoup, who went on to spread tax policy, essentially take Western developed tax policy to other parts of the world, including Japan, where these policies have worked. You'd see that tax scholars have gone from the classroom, the library, and so on, to the boardroom, where big decisions are made, and have had such a renowned impact on firms, even until this day. What do you think is the role of the modern tax scholar?
May I take upon that?
Yes, please.
Yes, I think that's a very interesting question, because it touches upon how the whole career of academics actually change. If we just remember, or I remember, when I think about professors of tax law during the time I was a student, there was very little engagement with what was going on abroad, what was going on, in terms of the real world. And most of the academics today, they engage actively in the decision makings of at a governmental level. They participate, with NGOs, and I think that there is a crucial break point for me where that started happening more and more, and is how many tax issues started appearing on the front of newspapers as global issues. So people started understanding, that taxation is, as was said before in this panel, it's not about the numbers. It's not about calculating a tax base and applying a tax rate. It's about policy. It's about what matters to people, that they live in countries and they have interests, that they are substantial, and the participation of academics became stronger, and at least in my own experience, advising governments on issues on tax policy, particularly after BEPS, it's been how the opinions, of experts is more and more welcome. Something that perhaps 20 years ago, when I was a student, it was way different. It was perceived in a different way, as you said. The academic were perceived more like people, that they are in a library, reading, researching, trying to theorize about things, but not connected to the real world. And today is exactly the opposite, in my view.
Can I also jump in on that?
Yes, please.
I fully agree with Leopoldo there. If you look at the last 10 years, there's been a complete change in how tax policy and certainly international tax policy has been discussed at the OECD level, but also at other fora. And I'm very happy that the scholars in general and myself as well have been involved in many of these discussions. Although I do think that it's also the role of the academic, of the scholars, to keep sort of to challenge the concepts that we sort of find normal, unchallengeable. As you said, we've built a system that was invented in 1923 when the world looked slightly different, on principles that were invented by Adam Smith, which is slightly before that even. The idea that, for example, tax neutrality is something that we always have to strive for, is in fact, in my opinion, something that is blocking meaningful tax reform. So I think that scholars also have a job, an obligation even, to challenge these ideas that we've been building tax policy on, and keep asking, so is this really working? Is this still something that serves us in the economy of today?
Lots to unpack there, but okay, Johann, you wanted to say something?
No, I just want to add two nuances here. I agree with everything that's been said, but I just want to add 2 points about what's been said so far. I think the one thing we shouldn't lose out of perspective is what changed with the past compared to now is that government, and especially supranational bodies, tend to listen to everyone, and that is a good thing. We should not divide this discussion as if government listens to academia and then goes and do something. It is very good that they listen to academia. It is good that they don't only listen to lobbyists from business, but they do also listen to business, right? And I think that is a very positive development. The second thing is, and I mean, we are talking about people that are building a tax career here. And this would apply to everyone. Learn the ropes first. I mean, you can't go and do 4 years of studies and a PhD and then expect that you can now tell the world how it's going to be run, right? It really helps to be a number of years in practice, to be a number of years in business, and then go and figure out how things are to be or to be done. I mean, the tax goes terribly wrong when it all goes theoretical.
May I say something about that? Just to challenge a little bit what Johann just said, and I say this after being perhaps 10 years or more than 10 years in practice before going 100% to be an academic in 3 different countries. I agree that there is indeed, a sort of a benefit to get into practice, but we shouldn't diminish, the work of pure academics that they're trying, to reshape the way in which we are thinking about taxation today. All of the things that we discuss, even in the BEPS context or Pillar 1 or Pillar 2, were unthinkable a few years ago. Even when we talk about things like exchange of information among countries, that was unthinkable during the time that I was studying international tax. So how that came onto the table, I would say, was precisely because you had people challenging those things, perhaps behind the desk, not necessarily in practice, because practice has a disadvantage as well, which is that you don't have the time to go in depth, right? And I practiced, and that was always a limitation.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I have to jump.
Can I bring 2 nuances to this?
Johann, apologies, but I have to jump in. I know that this is a really interesting conversation, one that we can have all day, right? But I also recognize that there are lots of topics to or subtopics to sort of jump into. But I'll try. In fact, I did have a follow-up question in that regard, which is whether academics overly criticize and take on the tag of armchair critics. But I'm going to keep that in abeyance for now and see if we can come back to it, just to try and push us forward. And at this point, I'd like to bring in Abimbola here with another question, which is relative to tax administration. And I think I wrote this down somewhere. So I'm just going to read it. It is often said that tax administration is tax policy, right? You can write the best laws, well thought out, but if it's not well implemented by administrators, then you lose sight of the real stuff. here. So I guess as an administrator in such a vital subnational tax admin body like the LIRS, how can you tell us how, say, your venture into tax academia, into advanced studies, has sort of prepared you to be sort of a better tax administrator? What perspective does that give you?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Okanga. I was really enjoying the discussion from Dr. Leopold, and I think that dovetails into the question that he asked me now. People in industry usually don't have the time to go deeper. Academia is able to do that. So for me, I been a tax administrator and then venturing into academia, and I'm lucky being able to transverse both sides. What I found is that the theoretical aspects are being brought into practice. So yes, we know that we want better tax policies. We know what has worked, as not as what is not working now. And so with the insights we get from research, we're able to show tax authorities that, you know what, this hasn't worked before. This is going to work. Let's move forward with this. So for me, it's been a thing of being able to transverse both academia and industry. We do research simply because we want to bring up-to-date ideas. We want to share knowledge in a better way. We hope that empirical studies will allow tax authorities to take what we have and use it for the better good. But there are sometimes challenges where tax authority itself is challenges with data. They are struggling with the results that you've given them. They're not sure it's going to work for them. And there's a silent political part of the tax economy. They're not sure if this will look good in the media. So you've taken your time to do research and share this and this and that, but the particular authority is thinking, we don't actually want to do this now. So for me, my experience has been, it's fantastic that two sides of a coin are being brought to bear. But the challenge is that sometimes those the fantastic research and fantastic ideas might not be too up the scale of the particular tax administrator. So you find out that your research is not doing so much good if it's not being implemented.
Okay.
That's a challenge. That's a challenge.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Lekki. Let me just, because we are running out of time somewhat, let me just push further and say, if you look around the tax, if you look at the tax space now, there's been this sort of friction between the global north and the global south, developed and developing countries. Those are very broad categorizations, clusters. But just, I mean, I think the most recent development has been the work that the UN is trying to do, which is essentially take center stage as the forum for the development of global tax policies. And that's being driven by countries on the global south. But just using that as a background, how can we sort of bridge the gap between the global north and the global south and sort of promote coordination and cooperation between these two clusters, in quotes, of our world? And I'd like to start with Jeroen on that.
Thank you so much, Okanga. Well, the last session obviously had some very good insights on that as well.
Yeah.
Let me just focus on how tax scholarship could help there. So, I think that the vote at the UN showed a large rift still between global north and south, and also maybe even a step back in global tax cooperation. And I think one of the problems is, and Wei Chu also wrote a very interesting paper on the issue, that we might not really understand what drives countries to really want to cooperate together, especially when it comes to allocating taxing rights. So I think that tax scholarships could actually contribute a lot to think about that question and figure out a way to especially bring advanced economies in the game of, okay, how do we actually get past this short-term view of, what if we just allocate tax revenue somewhere else, then we lose tax revenue that's politically unviable, towards, okay, how do we invest in the world, share risks, but also share rewards, as we build the global economy. So how do we incentivize cooperation there, and how do we bring advanced economies, especially on board?
Thank you. Does anyone want to jump in, because I do have other questions?
Yes, I wanted to jump in. Something that Dr. Landa said, he said, how do we incentivize cooperation? I think when we realize that each party has their own interests, and we have to take it into consideration. Also, there's been a lot of talk about sitting at the table and not being able to contribute. Now it's more about bringing your own agenda to the table. My personal opinion is nothing can be done without cooperation. And all these years we've actually collaborated. So what's changing now? Just showing that a lot of other countries were not satisfied and they were not happy they were not happy with the particular situation. So cooperation has always been the way to go, and I think we need to do more of that.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
May I say something very brief? Yes. So I know we're short on time, but I think it's too complicated to answer that question now. So why countries they cooperate? What are the trade-offs for cooperation? But there is something that we shouldn't forget about this resolution from the UN, which is perhaps try to see this from the perspective of what we had before was basically a narrative monopolized by an institution like the OECD, which is certainly not the most democratic of simply non-democratic at all. So I'm not sure whether this will change with the UN, but the fact that we are now sitting and discussing that something or some things should be done in a different way is positive, and we shouldn't forget about that.
Can I just, because this is exactly my fear, that it won't change. They will basically stay in the same narrative. We just change venue, and then cooperation still doesn't happen. So okay. I think, because I am completely in agreement with Leopoldo that the OECD was not Shangri-La at all. I think history has shown that now. But I think one of the problems is that with the inclusive framework, we never really understood why we get everybody on board to really cooperate and really work together, which then results in 5 countries leading the discussion and the rest either following or not really participating. So my fear is exactly that at the UN, the same thing will happen.
Yes,
can I just say something here? I mean, the way this discussion is presented is as though half the world is going to the UN and the other half is going to the OECD, and that is simply not the case, right? With the inclusive framework, most countries are going to both, right? So you're not going to get one country going to the OECD and saying A, and then going to the UN and going to say Z. You can do that once or twice, but then people are simply you're going to lose credibility in either or both of those organizations. And people should just bear this in mind when they are anticipating this huge tug of war between the OECD and the UN. It's not going to happen that way.
Well, thank you so much. Those are very important perspectives. Unfortunately, we don't have much time, so I'm going to ask one last question and see if we can get through it before we have to dismiss the session. And that's just talk generally about the challenges that you face as scholars, tax scholars, in translating your tax research into action. And I'll leave it open.
Okay, I want to jump in. Something I mentioned earlier, when your hard, fantastic work is not readily accepted, cannot be implemented because politically it's just not the right time, that's a challenge.
Yes. Okay. So let's keep it down to 3 seconds. And I think Dr. Lekki has been exemplary in that respect.
Well, I think
there's a lot of people they're looking for tax careers, right? You do need to realize there are 3 different careers. There's academia, there's consulting, and there's in-house. If you're academia, you're going to do all the reading, etc., etc. If you're consulting, you need to know your own country's tax system 100%, or you are liable. If you're in-house, you need to operate in 30 different countries. You're only going to know the broad outlines of everyone. Do think about those. The one is not better than the other, but they definitely are different.
Yes. Jeroen, Leopoldo, closing remarks?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is also one of the rewards, because working together across continents between scholars is challenging, but it's also a lot of fun. And sometimes you can come to really amazing and surprising results. And then the real challenge is getting your results out there and make sure that people get to see them and read them.
Terrific.
My takeaway very briefly is after last two experiences with a major tax reform in Indonesia, with implementation of interest limitation rules, and more recently with an international task force organized by the government of Curacao, is that there's always an opportunity to put your ideas on the table. So I know it's challenging, but people at the administration, they listen, and there is always one way or another, that your thoughts can go into the reality of how things are done in the real world, so to speak. So I would say those who are doing that job, keep doing that, because it's very valuable when you see those results translated into the life of millions of people.
Well, lady and gentlemen, I'm really sorry we have to leave it there. It's been a terrific conversation, and I'm sure the audience will have realized that as well. There's so much more to go on. We could have this conversation for the rest of the day, but this is all the time that we have, and we have to leave it there and maybe continue it on the backstage, as these conversations are eternal. But thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure listening to you. I am smarter today, and I look forward to engaging with you again in the future. Take care. Bye now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Definitely, I am smarter as well today. Dr. Okanga, you did a great job. Dr. Abimbola, thank you so much. I mean, the only woman, let me give you your flowers. You deserve it. Thank you so much. Also, Leopoldo, thank you so much, John, and also Jeroen, for making this particular session worth it. I mean, 40 minutes just passed by like like a wind passes through your face. Just before we could say Jack Robinson, it was over. And it felt like we hadn't even started yet. Thank you so much. Since this is a virtual event and it's very much controlled, we would have loved to stay for a very long time to just go ahead and keep talking, but we can't, because we need to complete all that we can within the little time that we have left. Okay, great one. The conversation has been powerful. So I'll just head over to YouTube to see what's going on right there, because we can't let our people just sit down there without doing anything. Okay. So Esther, I think you now have your answer to how you can begin your tax career and of course get adequate training. I mean, the panelists have done an amazing job helping us really understand how that goes. All right. Ayodele, yes. The as regards the question you asked right here, we're going to get back to you after the conference to let you really understand how it goes. Okay, thank you so much so far, everybody, for your comments. I'm smiling now because I'm seeing Kwam has given. If Sanjali is on YouTube, please let her know her name is now Omolewa. Omolewa, meaning a child is beauty. Wow, fantastic. That's the name they've given to you, Sanjali. So please help us pass the message across to Sanjali if she's not on YouTube, that she can add that to her name. Well, if it comes to gazetting it, well, I think it's up to her and and the law of her town. Okay, thank you so much. Osatsuyi, remarkable, I must say. Thank you for really making this happen. Thank you so much. So quickly, we just go straight into the next thing that we have for today. After all that is said and done, looking from the keynote address that looked at tax reform and of course the role that AI plays in ensuring that tax administration goes as usual, including the design as well as the impact, of course, on the implementation. That was done by Professor Rita. And we also went from there to the first panel of discussion, which was pretty rich, where we talked about reforming tax administration in developing economies, and our panelists did a great job. And from there, we also took a look at the two-course meal, of course, that Todd Buell did very, very much moderate on. The United Nations and the OECD and the collaborative efforts between them to ensure inclusivity and balanced representation in the global tax fair. And from there, we took a look at tax scholarship across borders, where the people who really wanted to upgrade their knowledge on tax issues were told what to do. So from there, it's more like we're going to put when you put the icing on the cake, you now have to put the toppings on it, yeah, the decorations and all those things to make it really, really look appealing, yeah. That's the session that we are at right now, and it's a fire chart session where it's supposed to be 25 minutes, but permit me to reduce it to 20 minutes so we can get to accommodate every other thing right here. And trust me, that 20 minutes is going to be really power packed. And this time around, we'll be asking questions to the people who have been there and done that. Now, with the increasing complexities and globalization of tax systems, we believe that facilitating the discourse on career opportunities in international tax is paramount in helping to shape the career path of aspiring international tax professionals and providing valuable insights to those already established in that area. Now, the idea behind this session is to shed light on the diverse spectrum of career opportunities within the field of international tax. Now, as the manner of us is right here, I would have gone ahead to introduce the panelists on this particular session, but they'll be doing that as they speak. You'll be hearing more about their journeys, experiences, as they moved from one level to the other to get to where they are right now. So I believe everything about, the career mapping up to this point, you will get to find out in the conversation we're having right now. So permit me to please bid a very big welcome. And as I'm saying a very big welcome, I want you to please go on the chat box on YouTube to keep giving a round of applause for Darlington Tallery. Thank you so much for joining us, Darlington. I hope you are there. Please let us have Darlington join us on the conversation, and let's hear his side of the story. Right. So as we welcome Darlington, and sometime during the conversation, let me just quickly get that out there. Fred Kwashi Awute Esquire. That sounds like my brother. The people who call other people Charlie. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, when he comes live, we're going to hear more of that from him. So while we are hoping to get them in, don't forget to let's hear you. Okay, fine. Keep the conversation going on right here on YouTube. I'm seeing everything that's going on right here on YouTube. You have been amazing. I mean, this has been one of the most amazing audiences I've had to engage in a while. I can see your thumbs up, Kwam. Thank you so much. Abidemi, thank you for your thumbs up. So Satuyi, Emmanuel, thank you. So let's go ahead and share what we have learned so far. If anything has really struck you really in the conversation that you think you're going to take with you so far, go ahead, drop it right here on the chat so I can read it out and let the whole world also learn from you. Also, if there's something you really don't agree with, or there's something that really brought about a concern that you think that the tax ecosystem needs to take a look at, not just in Nigeria, not just in Ghana, not just in the Bahamas, not just anywhere else, but the global tax ecosystem to take a look at, go ahead and drop that concern, that question right here on the chat box. Don't forget that it doesn't end here, right? The conversation does not end here. The smart ones would have done what I'm about to say, would have gone online, because I've done that too. You go on LinkedIn, go on Twitter, go on any other social media that you can get to find those people and follow them straight up. Drop a note for them. Let them know how much what they have said has impacted you, how much it has helped erase the confusion in your mind about certain issues, in the tax subject matter. and follow them, listen to them. You can get mentorship out of listening to these people. I'm sure I've looked out through their profile. They post things on taxation. And every one of you who is here and have not followed Tax Inspire, aka let me just call it Tax House on social media, you are a suspect. Straight to the point. So, in order for me to remove the suspicion from you and focus it on someone else, go ahead right now on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, maybe on Thread as well if you have the chance. Go ahead and follow, or just write it down that, okay, this is my to-do after the conference, take home point. Follow so and so after the conference. And Tax House is one of those people that you have to follow. You have no option. You have no option. Okay. So if we've got Fred, just let's let him in and let's have the conversation as briefly as we can, because time is no longer on our side. We probably have to reduce the conversation to 10 minutes and see how much energy, how much insight we can unpack into the next 10 minutes that we have got here. All right, I've got Fred Kwashi Awute in the house. Good day to you, and thank you so much for joining us on Tax Inspire 3.0.
Thank you very much. I think I'm happy to be part of this conference and also contribute my experience in international taxation. So thank you very much.
We are also glad too. Now, let's just go straight to the point, because we've got 10 minutes to unpack all the value, all the insight that you have. We hope you're able to milk out as much as we can from you. Now, someone with a diverse background in law, tax practice, and international advisory. Now, what are the various career paths that professionals can explore within the realm of international taxation?
Okay, thank you very much. International taxation has been there for a very long time, and given the fact that jurisdictions are stand alone where multinationals operate across all these countries, and also looking at the fact that emerging issues in international taxation relating to the digital economy, artificial intelligence, as well as transfer pricing, Pillar 1, Pillar 2 issues, it makes international tax a bit more complex in these days. And also, it also makes a way that it creates opportunity for tax practitioners to also explore themselves in there. Now, coming to the area of practice in international taxation, we have areas related to transfer pricing. We have areas relating to energy and resource management, mining and mineral, banking, treaty approaches, issues relating to drafting of legal issues concerning international transactions, for which you have to ensure that your taxpayers or your tax client are not unnecessarily exposed to taxes, and also ensuring that they are tax compliant across the jurisdiction that they operate in. So in a diverse way, there are a lot of tax practice area that one can actually make an end meet. Also, government, there's a greater need for government to raise revenue. So on that basis, international tax practitioners have the opportunity to join revenue authority, fiscal policy units in government, and then utilize their skill in that aspect. And also, legal firms are also there. Then we have the tax advisory firms, as well as then academia, where students need to be taught on matters of international taxation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for breaking that down for us. I believe that we are all taking notes right here at the sectors or the subsectors, as it were, or career path that professionals can explore. In fact, that part where you talked about the government really needing money. I mean, it's very obvious, to everybody around that that is one field that they can take a very good look at. Now, let's take a look a bit about the global perspective and ask, how important is it for tax professionals to have a global perspective in their careers, and what steps can they take to broaden their international tax knowledge as well as expertise?
Okay, as an international tax practitioner, you are required to, in fact, it's a privilege to be in this profession, because you're likely to have international exposure in every transaction that you are engaged in. And to go to the area where, what are the, qualification you need to get into this exposure, first, you have to get certain competencies that will enable you to be successful in this area. For example, you need to get professional qualification. Like we have professional bodies who run professional qualification international tax. We have Chartered Institute of Taxation UK, which run audit programs. Then we have the FBFD, which also run programs in international taxation and transfer pricing issues. So we really will need these professional competencies, but also you also have to get legal knowledge, not basic legal knowledge. We need to have in-depth knowledge in legal issues relating to international transactions. And for that will require that you need to have some academic degree in law or professional degree in law as well. But you cannot stop there, because as a tax practitioner, you are required to know jurisdictional tax law. You need to have better understanding of the jurisdictional tax law. For that matter, you need to know the laws of those countries that you have to operate in. But not far from that, you can also have to look at ways of trying to get certification from the professional regulation from the jurisdictions. And that is very important. For example, if you come to, let's say, Ghana, the tax practice is being regulated by Chartered Institute of Taxation. Then in Nigeria, you have Chartered Institute of Taxation Nigeria, also regulate tax practice. You can go to the UK Chartered Institute of Taxation. So you really need to get the jurisdictional certification to practice, because taxation is jurisdictional. And for that matter, you cannot have one qualification here and say you're going to practice in another jurisdiction. You need to get those jurisdictional certificates. Then also, you need to get some soft skills. Communications is very important. You need to know how to communicate effectively, because you're going to deal with people of high positions, and you have to break down legal issues to the common understanding of everybody. So your communication will have to be up to tax. Then your ability to interpret tax laws to the advantage, and break it down both for the tax practitioners and for the tax administrators, and then for the taxpayers. Because see, recently, government is engaged in tax audits, and tax audit is based on the transactions of the taxpayer. And tax audit is based on the tax laws of each jurisdictions and also international laws concerning double taxation agreements. You really have to interpret them very well. So good understanding of these legal issues are very important. Then also your ability to really have some form of numerical skills and pay attention to detail. So as a tax practitioner, your attention to detail is very important, because one thing can mix you and then you put your client into trouble, or you put the revenue also into trouble. So on that basis, your attention to detail is very important. So I would say that these are some of the soft skills which is required for a tax practitioner, especially in international tax environment, to succeed in this regard.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And while you were speaking, one of the big wigs in the tax industry, especially in Liberia, stepped into the room. Darlington Tellery, thank you so much for joining us. We have gone a bit into the conversation and we really do not have much time, but I would just like you to continue with the conversation, Darlington, from where Fred did stop, because he talked about what he said specifically, among others, was that once you are working in the tax industry, of course, you get that international, there's every tendency for you to get that international exposure. But let's talk about how, in your experience, you have seen that collaboration between the legal practitioners, between tax professionals, and international tax advisors contributes to the growth of careers in international taxation. I'm sorry if the lights in my background changed. There's a change of power supply. So don't worry, I'll be back very much in the light. So, Darlington, that question is to you, please, as briefly as you can.
Well, so adding from what Fred has said, as I'm in the public space working for the Revenue Authority here in Liberia, I think it's bringing that synergy between our work in the public space, the tax practitioner and the tax lawyer, has been an intriguing experience. And again, just to pick from what he said, capacity development, capacity enhancement is needed. One thing I realized that people develop capacity and then they don't enhance that capacity over time by engaging in continuous professional development. So I think as a career international tax lawyer or a career international tax accounting or whatever space, whether in the private or public space, the key for me is to continuously enhance that capacity, because you will meet diverse group of people, whether it's in the public space, whether it's in the international arena. And as the fast moving international tax landscape is, you just got to keep up with that pace. So you got to continuously enhance your capacity. So again, so like I said, that bridge is key. And then most times here in Liberia, I encourage people not only in my public space, but the people I interact with, tax lawyers, to say, you do regular tax law, but then you need to go and specialize. All right. A company law will not necessarily be a tax law. A criminal lawyer cannot necessarily be a tax lawyer. So you need to go one step beyond and specialize and continuously enhance your capacity. So I'm just
fact,
add on to what
I'm
say,
sorry to interrupt you at this point, Darlington, sorry, which leads me to the next question, which I'd want you to answer in part, and then I want Fred too to answer in part, if possible, 45 seconds each. So because we're already still in time from the next person, how individuals can specialize in some of those areas, just tidbits here and there. Thank you.
Well, so I will speak from experience. I did my first LLM in natural resource tax, and then one of my advisors, my professor then in the UK, the advisor say, okay, your skills are there, so go and advance yourself in international tax law. So I took that, and then as a result of my work, and then I went and did the advanced diploma in international taxation, the ADIT. I'd also went further because we needed the necessary capacity in Liberia in our space. So then I started reading international tax law. So the specialization is key. But I had a foundation, and then I went into specialization.
Fantastic. Fred?
Yeah, I think I will also share my personal experience in that regard, because it fit within the discussion. I must say that when I qualified as a chartered accountant with ACCA, I think I was like, oh, why don't I develop my skill in international taxation? And I take the tax going and do ADAT. And then after that, I said, why don't you be a lawyer? Because I realized that without a law, you cannot really succeed in international tax environment. So on the score of that, I have to go and do my LLB, I'm going to do my professional law course in Ghana School of Law and qualify as a lawyer. And then from there, one thing after the other, then that makes you, more robust in the matter of international taxation, because you can't be international tax practitioner and say that you're not a lawyer. There'll be some shortfall. So you have to specialization in international taxation. As you said, international tax is a specialized area in taxation. So for that matter, as an individual, we have to build capacity and then put a lot of things and specialize. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We wish we could continue with this conversation. And this is why I am going to really charge everybody who's listening to us right now to please go ahead and follow the people we just spoke to right now on social media. It is very important. I'm sure they are very much available on LinkedIn. You can go ahead, Darlington Tellery, as well as Fred, all the way from I think you're in Ghana, right? Fred, you're in Ghana.
Yes, sure.
Fred, fantastic. Chale, how are you, Chale? Thank you so much for joining us on the conversation. Go follow them, Fred Kwashi Abute, and also Darlington Tellery. Now, this Darlington has an S behind the G, so you don't go pick another Darlington instead, okay? Exactly. Go ahead, follow them, ask them whatever questions you want to ask them as regards how you can get to pivot in your career. It's very important you follow the people that know because of where they have been and where they are right now. Thank you so much, gentlemen. It was a short conversation, but it was impactful. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, my constituents right here on YouTube, what is going on? Quickly, we are already rounding up. I mean, the cake has been set, the icing has been put, and the toppings have been set as well. Now it is time for the serving to begin. So you can go ahead and practice what you have learned so far. This is the point where I'd call in at this point in time, Mr. Imo Osoro for his closing remark and vote of thanks. Instead of speaking, I don't know how many seconds I'm going to give to him because I don't know if you're going to be caught out of this. I don't know if you're going to be caught out of this, but Mr. Imo Osoro is one of the partners in the sponsoring firm Tax House. And as briefly as he can help us with his closing remark. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mercy. And really appreciate everyone who has contributed to the success of this conference. I think we are currently at the end of today's conference, and I really want to appreciate all the sponsors and all the associating firms that have contributed to make this day a success. I want to appreciate our speaker for today, that's Professor Rita de la Fera. And also want to appreciate Grace Perez Navarro, who we had an interview with her last week. It was really engaging. I want to appreciate all that moderated all the sessions and the panelists who showed up and kind of gave us an insight into this body of knowledge. I want to appreciate the planning committee. You guys have been working over the clock, and the technical team, you guys have done excellently well. I want to appreciate the sponsors, that Tax House, of which my team were really appreciative at this moment. I want to appreciate Rennie Consulting. They are a consulting firm, and you can reach out to them on their various social media platforms and websites. We also appreciate Adit UK. Adit UK, they've been really supportive, and also the task clubs in various institutions in Nigeria. A couple of them at the University of that's the task clubs in the University of Ilorin, Obafemi Awolowo University, Madu Bello University, Usman Danfodio University, University of Abuja, Bayero University, Redeemers University, Ogun State Institute of Technology, and University of Nigeria. And most importantly, we want to appreciate the chief convener of this conference, Mr. Olajide Omosebi. He has been working around the clock to ensure that today is a success, and really appreciate him for bringing together this league of extraordinary ladies and gentlemen in the tax space. And on behalf of Tax House and on behalf of sponsors, we hope to see you in the next conference 4.0, the Tax Inspire Conference 4.0. And until then, we wish you to stay safe, compliments of the season, and stay inspired. God bless.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that closing remark. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I do not need to add anything anymore because all that is needed to be said have been said. I want to thank you for being a fantastic audience. To every one of you who dropped your comments on YouTube, thank you so much. You made this particular, virtual session absolutely, totally worth it. You actually rock. Thank you also to all our speakers from all around the world. For those who got their African names, kudos. Can you please make good use of it? For those who didn't, I'm sure there'll be another time. Thank you so much for joining us on this particular, beautiful journey. We're just hoping that everything that has been used here today will be of benefit to everybody. And how can that be? By going ahead and practicing it, and not just practicing it, but also sharing the message. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been such an honor to be your host today, to move from one segment to the other. I want to believe that it was a smooth one. My name is Mercy Frank. A very big thank you to the organizing committee for finding me worthy to hold this particular job. I want to believe that I did a good job. Please go ahead, drop your comments, and let me know if you really did enjoy everything that happened here today. My name is Mercy Frank. And until Tax Inspire 4.0, keep doing a great job, keep growing, and keep being you. Thank you so much once again.